Chapter 5:16. Seeing Lu Heng like this, Chao Yuqing could not help but sigh softly. She also comforted her. Grand Secretary Lu has commanded the world for decades. I believe that he is not such a weak person. The next time I send a message, I will find a way to send a message to Grand Secretary Lu and let him know that you are still alive. I believe that with Grand Secretary Lu's love for you, he will be much better after receiving news of you. That's right. Qin Yining also smiled. There's still a long way to go. A moment of disappointment is nothing. Everything will be fine. Lu Heng nodded emotionally and thanked the two again, especially Chao Yuqing. Lu Heng thought to himself, as expected of Qin Yining's aunt. Birds of a feather flock together. Qin Yining is such an amazing woman. The people around her are also not to be trifled with. Everyone sat down again, and Chao Yuqing told them what she had observed when she arrived. Although it wasn't easy for me to find this valley, it was also because I was alone. Although the roads have been blocked by the heavy snow, the amount of food you have taken from Eugene Khan is not just a little bit. Such a large amount of food is enough to feed an army of 100,000 people for a month or two. How could Eugene Khan let you go? Have you thought about how you'll deal with him if he sends all of his troops to do a carpet search and you have less than 1,000 people? Chao Yuqing's words hit the nail on the head. Qin Yining smiled bitterly. To tell you the truth, we were also discussing this problem just now. We lack food, and our people on the other side of the desert also need food. In addition, we have a deep hatred for Eugene Khan. If there's an opportunity to stab him in the back, we naturally won't let it go. But now that the food is in our hands, we do feel that it's hot. We're also thinking about how to deal with it. Si Qin and Uncle Arhan also nodded. Yes, we really don't know what to do right now. If it's a small group, we won't be afraid. What we're afraid of is that there are too many of them. If we have to escort so much food, the group will definitely be stretched. At that time, we'll have to pay attention to the front and not the back. Chao Yuqing said, I think so too. Although the terrain of this valley is very hidden, and the snow outside has blocked the road, no one will find your footprints. It is indeed a good place to hide. However, this is not a long-term solution. If Si Qin's men catch up, won't you be trapped inside? In my humble opinion, we should find a chance to explore the surroundings as soon as possible and leave this place. Qin Yining, Lu Heng, and Arhan nodded in agreement. You're right. Qin Yining said, if we're going to leave, we'd better choose a day when it's snowing. Although it'll be difficult for us to travel, it'll be more convenient for us to cover our tracks. Everyone nodded again. Chao Yuqing thought for a moment and said, this place is too close to the border between Taitan and Dezhou. It's easy to attract attention. If you want to go, it's better to go to a remote place. Lu Heng said, you're right. I think we should head west. West? Chao Yuqing thought for a moment and said, in the east, there are a few big towns and a road that leads directly to Taitan. There's also a desert in the middle. Crossing the desert is also a shortcut to Dezhou. In the west, there are a few towns and a no-man's land. Yes, Lu Heng said, the landscape in the west is complicated and very wide. It'll be easier to play hide and seek with the pursuers there. If we go east, we'll be easily intercepted by the pursuers from the various prefectures and cities. If there are too many pursuers and they attack us from the front and back, I'm afraid we'll all die here with only 800 people. Chao Yuqing thought for a moment and couldn't help but frown and scratch her head. She smiled bitterly and said, if only Sister Yi's father was here. He's so smart, he'll definitely have a way. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh when he heard Chao Yuqing's words. But after laughing, the longing for her father in her heart burned even hotter. Qin Huayuan's understanding, tolerance, and love for her were definitely not fake. His teachings also had a deep impact on her. To be honest, when she was homeless outside, the people she missed the most were Pang Xiao and Qin Huayuan. Even the Sun Clan paled in comparison. Qin Yining took a deep breath and told himself that as long as he could persevere, he would be able to return home safely sooner or later. At that time, he would be able to enjoy the happiness of family and be filial to his father. He didn't know how beautiful his future would be. In fact, during the countless days and nights in the desert, Qin Yining relied on this kind of self-consolation to give himself a ray of hope and persevere. I agree with Second Master Lu's opinion. Let's go west for the time being. For in the land of the Tartars, the chance of survival was greater in the west. During this period of time, we'll observe the situation in Dezhou and the war between the two countries. If the two sides have the intention to go to war, Dezhou's emperor will definitely send Wang Yi to the front lines. At that time, we can contact Dezhou's army and follow Wang Ye's path. With so much food in exchange, I believe Dezhou's people will definitely agree to protect the Minuo tribe. Hearing this, Uncle Arhan smiled and nodded repeatedly. That's good. If that's really the case, then it couldn't be better. Lu Heng also nodded and said, if things go smoothly, things will naturally develop in this direction. At that time, all the tribesmen of the Minuo tribe will be saved. As for how to live after going to Dezhou, Dezhou is vast and has many beautiful mountains and rivers, but no one lives in them. It's easy to survive in the grasslands, so there's no need to worry about that. However, we also need to consider another situation. What if we run into pursuers first? Uncle Arhan wiped his face and patted Lu Heng's shoulder, saying heartily, Brother Lu, can't you say something better? But if we really run into such a situation, then we brothers naturally won't be afraid of them. Our Minuo tribe has never had any cowards. Anari tortured and killed our previous chief, and so many of our tribesmen were slaughtered. They didn't even let the children in their infancy go. We'll definitely fight to the death with Utkin Khan. If that really happens, we'll fight them to the death. Uncle Arhan's accent in Dezhou was not very accurate, but Qin Yining, Lu Heng, and Chao Yuqing were all enlightened by his words, and they instantly felt lofty and heroic. Chao Yuqing had always been a straightforward person. Hearing this, she also laughed heartily. That's right. If worst comes to worst, we'll fight them to the death. We're not afraid of them. Qin Yining and Lu Heng didn't know whether to laugh or cry for a moment. Qin Yining knew Chao Yuqing better, so he wasn't too surprised. Lu Heng, on the other hand, thought in surprise, such a delicate beauty is actually so forthright and unafraid of death. It's really impressive. Qin Yining said calmly, if we run into such a situation, we naturally won't be afraid. However, that's also the worst-case scenario. We'll try our best to prevent things from developing into such a situation. The most important thing is to minimize the casualties of our tribesmen. Lu Heng also said, that's right. Then tomorrow, we'll first scout out the surrounding situation and move to the west as soon as possible. At the same time, we'll order people to scout ahead and reduce our casualties. That's good. Qin Yining nodded. Chao Yuqing thought about it and also felt that it was feasible. Anyway, she couldn't think of any other way, so she also nodded in agreement. Si Qin and Uncle Arhan then told the tribesmen of the Minuo tribe what had just happened in the Taitan language. They discussed it with the tribesmen and at the same time boosted their morale. Qin Yining then pulled Chao Yuqing back to his tent. This tent was very simple. It was only big enough for an adult to walk in with his back bent. The floor was covered with animal skins and quilts. Because Qin Yining was now the tribal leader in the eyes of the Minuo tribe, the women accompanying him in the tent had already thoughtfully prepared hot water for him. They had also prepared an extremely precious hot water bottle. They filled it with hot water and stuffed it into the quilt to warm it up. Qin Yining pulled Chao Yuqing to sit cross-legged on each other. He pulled the quilt over their legs and placed the hot water bottle at their feet. Chao Yuqing smiled and sighed. "Ah, it's so warm." "Yes." Qin Yining also narrowed his eyes comfortably. He held Chao Yuqing's hands and said, "Aunt Chao, you must have suffered a lot to look for me alone outside, right?" Chao Yuqing's hands were held by Qin Yining. At this moment, she felt awkward and happy at the same time. Although she was married, she didn't have any children. She also didn't have any younger generation in her family that she liked so much. In addition, she had feelings for Qin Huayuan. Because of her love for Qin Huayuan, she also treated Qin Yining like she loved him. Therefore, in her heart, she actually treated Qin Yining as her own younger generation. She thought that she was a rough person who didn't know how to say beautiful words. She could only contribute her heart and make sure that she had a clear conscience. She only felt that she had a clear conscience and was at ease. She never thought that Qin Yining would actually hold her hand and talk to her without any ill feelings. Her younger generation had never held her hand and talked to her like this before. Seeing Qin Yining's smiling face, Chao Yuqing was only left with joy after the awkwardness. She held Qin Yining's hand to warm it up and said with a smile, "Fortunately, I've been out there for so many years and have seen all kinds of storms, so I'm not afraid to go out alone. It's just that I couldn't find your whereabouts earlier and was very anxious. At that time, I was injured and saw someone take you away. I didn't know how to explain it to your father. At that time, I thought that if something happened to you, I wouldn't have the face to see your father for the rest of my life. I might as well die and be done with it. Fortunately, the heavens protected you and you were safe and sound. When I heard that you assassinated a Nari Khan, I was so happy." Chao Yuqing was so blunt that Qin Yining couldn't help but smile. "Aunt Chao, thank you very much." Chao Yuqing felt her sincerity and felt very warm in her heart. However, she pretended to be angry and said, "If you say that, it means that we're estranged from each other." "No, I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart." Qin Yining said anxiously, "Aunt Chao, I treat you as my family. How could I be estranged from you? It's just that I like to say whatever I have to say. I'm grateful to you, so I want you to know." Chapter 5:17. Qin Yining knew that Chao Yuqing was a straightforward person when she spoke so bluntly. She might as well make things clear today. "Aunt Chao, I understand what you're thinking. I believe that with my father's intelligence, he also understands what you're thinking. My father naturally has his reasons for doing what he's doing. That's a matter between you and your elders. It's normal for my mother to be jealous. To put it bluntly, if there was someone like Aunt Chao, who is several times better than me in appearance, talent, and character, who has always been infatuated with my husband, I would also be jealous. But Aunt Chao, no matter how jealous my mother is or what my father thinks, in my heart, you're a very good elder. You're like an elder sister to me. Our family has suffered so much, but you've never left my father. When we were besieged by Wang Yi in Dian, if it weren't for you, my father would have been long gone. I don't care about the love and hatred between elders. Anyway, in my heart, I believe that you're a good person who values affection and righteousness. I also feel that I hit it off with you. That's why I don't look at others when we're friends. Aunt Chao, you're really good to me and treat me like a member of your family. Don't I also treat you like my own aunt?" Qin Yining's words pierced straight into Chao Yuqing's heart. Chao Yuqing's sincerity towards Qin Huayuan could be seen by heaven and earth. However, life was unpredictable. She always had to make so many helpless choices, and in the end, it led her to this point. She wasn't afraid of being alone. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to get close to Qin Huayuan. It didn't matter if Qin Huayuan was loyal to his wife or if he really didn't like her. Anyway, her love for Qin Huayuan had always been her own business. She never needed Qin Huayuan to take any responsibility. It was just that in the dead of night, he sometimes felt lost. When his family Qin was hated by the Sun clan, he also felt that torturing himself was really cheap. But with Qin Huayuan's status and environment, how could there be no one around to protect him? It was precisely because she hoped that Qin Huayuan would live well. Even if he lived to 100 years old and still only treated her as a close friend, she would still be willing to endure hardship. Chao Yuqing had never thought that Qin Yining would sincerely accept her one day. She knew that Qin Yining was a girl who valued relationships. Because of her experiences in her youth, she longed for the warmth of a family and the motherly love of the Sun clan. After going through so many ups and downs, she finally received the maternal love of the Sun clan. Naturally, she was wholeheartedly filial to the Sun clan. At first, when she was ordered to stay by Qin Huayuan's side and pretend to be his concubine, she sometimes really thought of herself as Qin Huayuan's concubine, and expressed her envy and jealousy towards the Sun clan. At that time, Qin Yining's zeal to protect the Sun clan was like a little beast baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. But over the years, they had gone through trials and tribulations together, and they had gone through fire and water together. She finally moved this little beast with her sincerity and made her put away her claws and fangs. Chao Yuqing finally felt that her efforts were not in vain. Even if she didn't receive Qin Huayuan's love, she felt that it was worth it to receive Qin Yining's approval and be willing to sincerely treat her as her aunt. Chao Yuqing was a strong person, and she wouldn't cry easily. But at this time, she felt that her nose was sour and her eyes were hot. Tears almost fell from her eyes. Chao Yuqing looked away in embarrassment. She didn't want Qin Yining to see her like this. Qin Yining keenly noticed this, but didn't say anything. Instead, she went forward and hugged Chao Yuqing. "Aunt Chao, I will be filial to you in the future. In the future, if you are tired outside, you can come to my house. I will treat you well. In the future, if Peng Zhishi and I have a son, I can ask you to teach my son martial arts. Your martial arts are so strong, so learning from you is the right thing to do." Chao Yuqing wiped away her tears at an angle that Qin Yining couldn't see. After a long time, she calmed down and scolded jokingly, "You little girl, you're dreaming. You're already thinking about my martial arts. If we're talking about martial arts, I'm not allowed to cheat or assassinate. I probably can't even last 20 moves against your Wang Yi. You still want me to teach you? That's not the same. If I learn from you and Wang Yi, I'll be even stronger." Chao Yuqing burst into laughter. "You greedy little girl. Later, I'll tell your Wang Yi and let him laugh at you." When Qin Yining heard this, he couldn't help but laugh loudly. Chao Yuqing also laughed along. That night, the two of them slept side by side. This was the most peaceful and warmest night Qin Yining had slept that night. Early the next morning, the tribesmen of the Minuo tribe went out to scout the way. Chao Yuqing also went out to scout after eating her rations. After making sure of the direction, they left the valley and headed for the vast land in the west. With Chao Yuqing's help, Qin Yining was very happy, and their journey was very smooth. On the afternoon of the third day, the scout in front suddenly ran back and reported, 4 or 5 people have appeared ahead. Judging from their clothes, they should be from Dezhou. They're all riding horses. If we continue forward, we'll meet them." Chao Yuqing raised her eyebrows. She shook the reins in her hand and said, "I'll go check out the situation." Then she spurred her horse and left. Qin Yining checked the surrounding terrain and told everyone to be on guard so that they could meet the enemy at any time. After a short while, Chao Yuqing spurred her horse back. She brought 5 people with her. They were all wearing cotton-padded cloaks and hats. It was obvious that they were from Dezhou just by looking at their physiques. When the people came up to them, Chao Yuqing smiled and said, "They're acquaintances. Sister Yi, they're people you know." Before Qin Yining could say anything, Lu Heng beside him said in surprise, "Fei Ying, Filian." When they heard this, the two middle-aged men who were originally on guard looked over. When they met Lu Heng's gaze, they were delighted. They jumped off their horses and rushed over. They fell to the ground and kowtowed, "Second Master. We've finally found you." Lu Heng quickly went forward to help them. He patted the snow off their foreheads and said happily, "It's really you guys. Second Master, it's great that you're fine." The other three people also got off their horses and walked over to Qin Yining to salute him. "Alliance Chief, we've finally found you." Qin Yining said in surprise, "Why are you guys here?" He was a little depressed that they directly called him Alliance Chief. The people who came were none other than the three hall masters she met when she first took over the Qin Tian alliance from her grandmother. They were Liao Zhibing, who used to be a swordsman, Zhao Yinhua, and Zhao Wanjin, who used to be bandits. However, when he saw Liao Zhibing, Qin Yining couldn't help but think of Mrs. Liao, who was abandoned by Si Qin in the desert. Chapter 518. Although Qin Yining was happy, he still had some vigilance in his heart. Liao Zhibing, Zhao Yinhua, and Zhao Wanjin bowed to Qin Yining again. Zhao Yinhua said happily, "Let's go, we've finally found the Alliance Master. We heard that the Alliance Master killed the Khan of Anari, and we all said that the Alliance Master is really a heroine. You've created such a big thing in the Taiten, and all the brothers in the Alliance feel honored." "That's right, Alliance Master." Zhao Wanjin was also very happy. Their direct way of addressing the Alliance Master made Lu Heng look at them in confusion. Qin Yining couldn't help but sigh in his heart. However, at this time, Lu Heng wasn't an outsider, so he didn't hide it anymore. "They're from the Qin Tian Alliance." Lu Heng wasn't surprised. In fact, he had already guessed this in his heart. Hearing this, he just smiled and pulled Fei Lian and Fei Ying, who had followed him for many years, to the side to talk. "Where did you come from?" "Second Master, we came from home." Lu Heng's face lit up, and he said anxiously, "How's the situation at home? How's my grandfather?" Fei Ying and Fei Lian looked at each other, and their smiles were very bitter. "Second Master, now that something happened to you outside, the family is in chaos. Previously, the old master supported you, but now that something happened to you, those who were eyeing the position of the family head all came forward. The first master isn't in the capital all year round, and his connections are also not in the capital. He returned home to take care of the old master, but his power is limited, and he can only watch as the second and third master abuse his power." "That's right. Now that the second master has taken over the power of the family head, perhaps because he's worried that your majesty will blame him, the second master actually pushed the matter of the treasure map and the assassination of the Taiten Khan to you alone." Not only did they say this, but even the subordinates also said that as long as someone asks, the fault is yours. When the old master found out, he was very angry. Your Majesty called the old master into the palace several times to scold him. The old master was worried about you and held back his anger. When we came out, the old master was already sick. When Lu Heng heard this, he closed his eyes tightly and raised his head in pain. It took him a long time to hold back the tears that were about to fall. It was his fault. It was his willfulness that led to the current situation. He had implicated such an old man for no reason. It was all his fault. Now that things had come to this, there was no point in regretting. If something really happened to his grandfather because of this incident, Lu Heng would never be able to forgive himself. "Second Master, don't be too sad. That's right, second master. Seeing that Lu Heng was so upset, Fei Ying and Fei Lian hurriedly consoled him. The two of them were not eloquent people. They clumsily said a lot of things, but not a single one of them hit the nail on the head. However, Lu Heng had already felt their kindness. He smiled and patted the two of them on the shoulder. I am also very happy to see you here. Don't worry, I will not be depressed because of this incident. What I have lost, I will take back. When Fei Lian and Fei Ying heard Lu Heng's words, they were quite moved. They said proudly, as long as second master has orders, we brothers will not dare to disobey. Lu Heng was very touched and returned a smile. Good, then I will rely on you. On the other side, Qin Yining and the three people from the Qin Tian alliance went to another place far away. Qin Yining smiled and said, How did you find this place? Liao Zhibing cupped his hands and said, We don't know where Alliance Master is, but after hearing that you assassinated the Nari Khan, we guessed that Eugene Khan would definitely track you down. Therefore, we decided to come to the Tatent to try our luck. Qin Yining heard this and said, You are also very lucky. We just happened to run into you. That's right. Liao Zhibing smiled and said, If it wasn't for the user, who knows how long we would have to search outside. Zhao Yinhua and Zhao Wanjin also nodded. Liao Zhibing then asked, Alliance Master, actually I still want to ask you about something. Qin Yining said with a sad expression, You want to ask about Mrs. Liao, right? Liao Zhibing nodded and said, Yes, I have lost contact with my wife for several months. I originally thought that she might be with you, but now it seems that she is not. To tell you the truth, after Mrs. Liao hid the treasure, she tricked me into going to a fake cave. In the end, she confronted my people and the two sides were in a mess. At the same time, the Earth Dragon turned over and we hurriedly ran away. However, we were caught by Si Qin and taken to the Taten. Because the emperor of the great Zhou dynasty was determined to get the treasure, he had been searching for it all along the way. That was why Si Qin brought us into the desert. The desert environment was harsh, and there was a lack of water and food. Si Qin interrogated Mrs. Liao and the people around her several times. After he didn't get anything out of them, he left Mrs. Liao and the other two brothers in the desert. What? Liao Zhibing's eyes widened in shock. That bastard, he left them in the desert. Yes. Qin Yining sighed. At that time, I was tied up, and there was nothing I could do. Later on, Si Qin almost threw me away. However, at that time, a Nari Khan brought people into the desert to look for Si Qin. They also had enough water and food, so I was left behind. Liao Zhibing's eyes were red as he took 2 steps back. He looked like he was deeply hurt. Although Qin Yining couldn't tell how much Liao Zhibing was telling the truth, he still sympathized with him. At that time, Mrs. Liao would have died if she was left in the desert. He didn't know if Mrs. Liao regretted not telling him the whereabouts of the treasure. Seeing Liao Zhibing so sad, Zhao Wanjin and Zhao Yinhua supported him on both sides. They couldn't help but comfort him. Big brother, my condolences. Liao Zhibing shook his head and said sadly, If I had said a few more words to her and stopped her from finding the treasure, she wouldn't have lost her life. That's right, big brother. Sister-in-law didn't listen to you about the treasure. Now, she's no longer here. It's useless for you to be sad. Moreover, we've completely lost the whereabouts of the treasure. Qin Yining was suspicious in his heart, but his expression remained unchanged as he listened to the three of them. Qin Yining didn't believe that Liao Zhibing and the others didn't know the whereabouts of the treasure, but they didn't look like they were lying. Although he was suspicious, Qin Yining was able to accept it. For the sake of the treasure, she had already lost so much. There was no need for her to force herself to pay any more for this material object. Although Qin Yining didn't fully trust the people of the Qin Tian alliance, he made sure that they wouldn't reveal their whereabouts. The people of the Qingtian alliance weren't loyal to Dezhou. They were marginalized in Dian in their early years. When they came to Dezhou, they didn't have any residence permits. They spent all their time doing business on the border between Taitan and Dezhou to earn money. They basically had no sense of belonging to Dezhou. If there were no benefits, they wouldn't reveal their whereabouts. As long as they could deal with it for a short period of time, it wouldn't be a problem. Qin Yining had the three of them stay and arranged for them to stay in a tent. However, he didn't tell them the route of their future migration. On the other hand, Lu Heng's attitude towards the two guards was very warm. He invited them to join the group of tribesmen chatting by the campfire with Uncle Arhan and introduced them to the tribesmen of the Minuo tribe. During this period of time, Qin Yining rarely saw Lu Heng so happy. Seeing him express his joy so straightforwardly, Qin Yining thought about it and didn't say the warning he wanted to give. Lu Heng was a smart person. He had more experience in the ups and downs of the business world than she did. He didn't need to remind him. He knew to be on guard. That night, Qin Yining stayed in the same tent as Chao Yuqing. Fei Lian and Fei Ying stayed with Lu Heng. The next day, everyone set off again. Qin Yining didn't think much of the addition of these people to the group. Lu Heng, on the other hand, was very happy every day. However, as time passed, their group gradually began to encounter or intersect with their pursuers. Their speed slowed down. They were carrying so many supplies, but they couldn't bear to leave them behind. They could only brace themselves and fight to the death with Si Qin's pursuers. Fortunately, the three members of the Qingtian alliance and Lu Heng's two guards had joined them. They were all very strong and could take on 10 people at a time. With them around, it was much better than just the tribesmen fighting with their lives on the line. However, the pursuers were also in contact with each other. Once a group of pursuers discovered them, it was impossible to guarantee that not a single enemy had escaped on the battlefield. Therefore, their situation became more and more passive. It was very easy for them to run into another group of pursuers who heard the news and came after them within 2 days of escaping. After being tormented like this for more than 10 days, everyone was physically and mentally exhausted. After shaking off the pursuers for a short while, everyone set up simple tents and quickly caught up on sleep. Qin Yining and Chao Yuqing didn't feel sleepy at all. They were constantly worried about when the pursuers would catch up to them. Their nerves were very tense. As Qin Yining closed his eyes to rest, he heard a low voice outside the tent. Alliance head. Qin Yining suddenly opened his eyes and asked in a low voice, "Who is it?" Alliance head. "I am Liao Zhibing." Liao Zhibing lowered his voice and said, "I have something to report." Qin Yining and Chao Yuqing looked at each other. Chao Yuqing nodded. Qin Yining said, "Please come in and talk." Liao Zhibing excused himself and lifted the curtain to enter. He very appropriately squatted at the entrance of the tent. Alliance head, I just discovered that Second Master Lu escaped. Qin Yining was stunned. Escaped? How did you know? Did you see him? Today, the 3 members of the Qingtian alliance's tent was next to hers. Her tent was next to the female tribesman's tent. Lu Heng and the 2 guards were with Ha Bala and Shiganbala on the other side of the group. There were more than 800 tribesmen. In addition, they were also escorting the rations. The distance between them was especially far. If they wanted to see Lu Heng escape with their own eyes, they would have to cross the entire camp to the other side. What was Liao Zhibing doing on the other side in the middle of the night instead of sleeping? Chapter 5:19. Qin Yining had heard of Miao Jiang's Gu techniques, but he had never seen them before. Now that he heard Liao Zhibing's words, he couldn't help but ask in surprise, "You can sense his movements?" Yes. If he was close, I wouldn't be able to sense him clearly. But if he was too far away, I would naturally be able to sense him. Qin Yining trusted Lu Heng in his heart. After going through so many trials and tribulations together, Qin Yining had already seen through Lu Heng's character. He was an ally that was absolutely trustworthy. Maybe he just has something to do. Qin Yining couldn't help but think of an excuse for Lu Heng. Liao Zhibing said, "Alliance leader, I can sense that he is heading towards the southeast at a very fast speed." He could even sense the direction. No wonder it was called the tracking goo. Qin Yining couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Chao Yuqing hesitated and said, "Southeast, isn't that the direction of Dezhou's border? Could it be that second Master Lu decided to return to Dezhou because he was too nervous after being chased by the troops these past few days and his life was hanging by a thread? It would be fine if he simply wanted to return to Dezhou, but I'm afraid he will betray us." Liao Zhibing said in a deep voice, "If he exposes our location to the pursuers and allows them to surround and attack us to divert the attention of the pursuers and make it easier for him to return to the great Zhou dynasty, then our situation will be really dangerous." Qin Yining heard this and his frown deepened. "I still don't believe that second Master Lu would betray us. But it is indeed suspicious that he is leaving like this." Qin Yining looked at Liao Zhibing. "Can the tracking goo you mentioned track his location? How far away will it be before it can no longer sense him?" Liao Zhibing said, "The closer the distance, the clearer the location of the mother goo and the child goo. If it is far away, it can only sense the general direction." As for the distance, Liao Zhibing smiled confidently, "It won't be a problem to cross half of Dezhou." Qin Yining couldn't help but praise, "That's a really good ability." After pondering for a moment, he said, "How about this, let's not make this matter public for now. Let's call the two brothers from the Zhao family. We'll go to his tent to take a look. After confirming that he's really gone, we'll chase after him and take a look." Liao Zhibing nodded. "That's good too." Qin Yining quickly dressed neatly. He wore a thick cotton-padded jacket and a cotton-padded hat. Half of his face was buried in the scarf. Then, he, Chao Yuqing and the three people from the Green Sky Alliance walked through the camp with a natural expression and went to Lu Heng's tent on the other side. Just as he reached the tent and was about to lift the curtain, he saw a head poke out from the tent next door. Uncle Arhan asked, "Why are you here?" In order to avoid the pursuers, everyone was very alert. Uncle Arhan, Harbala, and Shaganbreath stayed in a small tent. The three of them took turns to keep watch. Uncle Arhan had just woken up from his nap when he heard footsteps. Qin Yining made a shushing gesture with her lips. They were talking at the door, but there was no response from Lu Heng's tent. It was clear that he was really gone. Qin Yining opened the tent. It was empty. Not only Lu Heng, but his bodyguards Fei Lian and Fei Ying were also gone. The most important thing was that their bags were also gone. Liao Zhibing lowered his voice and said, "He really escaped." Uncle Arhan had already dressed properly. He crossed his arms and poked his head into the tent to take a look. His expression also changed. "Where is he? Where did the patriarch go?" Qin Yining frowned and asked, "You didn't hear any movement next door?" "No, although I took a nap just now, I was very alert the whole time. I could even hear someone snoring, but I really didn't hear any movement." This proved that Lu Heng didn't have a physical collision when he left. Otherwise, the people next door would definitely have heard it. Liao Zhibing said, "Someone must have quietly left while everyone was resting. These days, we have been pursued by the soldiers. Second Master Lu probably wants to go back to Dezhou." Qin Yining shook his head and said very seriously, "I don't believe he would do that. Before we have conclusive evidence to prove that he escaped, I ask Mr. Liao not to say that, so as to avoid creating a bad impression in front of the clansmen. Moreover, our current situation is really not optimistic. Even if second Master Lu really went back to his home, it is understandable. Whether he stays or goes, he has the freedom to make his own decisions. Liao Zhibing's lips moved, but in the end, he didn't continue to argue with Qin Yining. He only said, "Then what do we do now?" According to the Alliance Master, it is his freedom to leave. We can just ignore it. Qin Yining looked deeply at Liao Zhibing. His eyes were full of majesty and disapproval. He looked at Liao Zhibing until Liao Zhibing lowered his head. Qin Yining said, "No matter what reason he left, we should chase after him and ask him clearly. Even if he wants to return to his home country, with his personality, he won't leave without saying goodbye. We have to make sure he is safe first." Uncle Arhan said, "What the princess says makes sense. All of our clansmen treat the princess and second Master Lu as our tribe leaders. At this time, please give us the orders. We will do whatever you want us to do." Uncle Arhan's expression was fervent and his eyes were sincere. Qin Yining was very touched. "Uncle Arhan, what I mean is that we should not alert the clansmen of this matter first. My brothers can sense second Master Lu's direction. We will chase after him and see the situation first. As for the camp, why don't we leave the two brothers, Harbala and Shaganbala, to lead the team?" Qin Yining also had her reasons for making this decision. If she didn't bring the clansmen of the Minuo tribe, and if she was suspected of escaping, then the loss would outweigh the gain. She had been with the people of the Minuo tribe for so long, and she admired the sincerity, enthusiasm, and strength of this tribe. Even if there came a day when she really wanted to leave, she definitely wouldn't leave without saying goodbye. She didn't have such thoughts, so naturally she wanted to avoid any misunderstandings. Uncle Arhan didn't think too much about it. He only said, "Then I will call two more brothers who are trustworthy and keep their mouths shut. We will quietly ride out and say that we are going to scout the way, and let Harbala and his brother stay behind to manage the camp. We will just hurry back as soon as possible. Uncle is right. Let's do as you say." Qin Yining smiled and nodded in agreement. Uncle Arhan went to make the arrangements and called two more Minuo clansmen. Qin Yining, Chao Yuqing, and the three people from the Qin Tian alliance also came together. Each of them rode a horse and chased in the direction Liao Zhibing had told them. When Lu Heng opened his eyes in a daze, he found himself being carried on someone's shoulder like a huge burden. The bones in the person's shoulder made his stomach hurt. When he stood up while running, the angle of his head almost made him throw up. "You!" Lu Heng coughed twice and suddenly woke up. "Feilian, Fei Ying. Where are you taking me?" "Second Master, you are awake." Feilian, who was carrying him, was panting. His heavy breaths caused a cloud of white mist to appear in front of him. Fei Ying, who had been carrying Lu Heng for a while, finally recovered and said, "Second Master, don't panic. We are just taking you home. What's so good about you staying with those barbarians? Isn't it better to go home and be a master?" Lu Heng shook his heavy head and forced himself to stay awake. He gritted his teeth and reprimanded, "You drugged my water. Second Master, don't be angry. We are doing this for your own good. Look at the life you are living now. You are living like a refugee. You are living a good life at home, eating good food and drinking good wine. When you go out, there is a group of people behind you. Now you are being chased like a grandson. We are doing this for your own good." Lu Heng gritted his teeth. His muddled mind was actually able to analyze the current situation and the origin of these two people in an instant. "Are you following my second uncle now?" Fei Ying and Feilian's expressions froze. After a while, Fei Ying said, "Second Master, don't say that. No matter who we follow, aren't we still part of the Lu family? Following you or Second Master is also for the Lu family. For the Lu family. Lu Heng's chest tightened and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He trusted them so much. During this period of time, he wholeheartedly treated them as his own brothers. He originally thought that under such a harsh environment, they were still able to go through so much trouble to find him. They were really loyal and valued relationships. Who would have thought that they were only taking him away and handing him over to second uncle? That's right, the position of patriarch of the Lu family now belonged to second uncle. Feilian and Fei Ying, in the eyes of outsiders, were loyal to the eldest branch. If they wanted to continue living in the Lu family, they would have to show their sincerity. Otherwise, why would Master trust them not to betray him? If he handed him over to second uncle would be able to push all the crimes against the Lu family onto him. With him as the scapegoat, second uncle would be able to sit in the patriarch's position openly. He would even be able to form a good relationship with Your Majesty and become a direct descendant of Your Majesty. What a good plan. Unfortunately, he was swayed by his emotions and trusted the wrong person. At this time, Lu Heng really regretted trusting them so much. Now, he had been quietly taken away. In order not to alarm the clansmen, these two didn't even dare to take a horse with them and relied on walking. If Qin Yining and the clansmen thought that he was afraid of the pursuers and ran for his life, what should he do? He, Lu Heng, had never been a person who was afraid of death. Fei Ying and Feilian were betraying their old master for their own selfish reasons. They had even trampled on his reputation and credibility. Lu Heng was being carried head first. He was both angry and anxious. For a moment, he saw stars and found it difficult to breathe. He used all his strength to pound on Feilian's back. Fei Ying, who was standing to the side, saw that Lu Heng's expression was not right and hurriedly said, "Quick, let second master down to catch his breath first. Don't suffocate him to death. When the time comes, we brothers won't be able to report back." Chapter 520. Fei Ying was also out of breath from running. He looked down at Lu Heng, who was sitting under the tree with his eyes closed and panting. "Second master, are you all right?" Lu Heng closed his eyes and refused to speak. His brows were tightly knitted, squeezing out the word "chuan" between his eyebrows. His tightly pursed lips were white because of excessive force, but his chest was violently rising and falling because of rapid breathing. It was obvious that his heart was already anxious. Fei Lian and Fei Ying looked at each other. Their eyes quickly flashed with apology, but more than that, there was determination. Since they had decided to rely on the second master, they had to show some sincerity. Otherwise, how could they win people's trust? Although doing this was somewhat unfair to Lu Heng, and they didn't know how the second master would deal with Lu Heng after handing him over, they couldn't care so much about it. The two sat down beside Lu Heng, one on the left and one on the right, to rest for a while. Fei Ying drank a mouthful of water and wiped the water stains on his mouth. He said, "Second master, don't be angry. Now that the situation is like this, even if you are angry, you still have to go home, right? We won't make things difficult for you. As long as you are obedient and don't cause any problems on the way, we will get home safely, and everything will be fine." "Yes, second master, you don't have to worry. Although the second master has become the master, he won't necessarily do anything to you. No matter what, you are still the legitimate son of the Lu family. Isn't your reputation outside? Even if your majesty wants to do something to you for killing Khan, I believe that the second master will not hand you over because of family affection. You can rest assured." Lu Heng still had his eyes closed, and his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles began to turn white. "You can shut up now." "Hey!" Fei Ying laughed loudly. "Second master, what are you saying? Are you not happy to hear the truth that we are telling you?" "But that's right. You are the second master, the most favored one by the old master. The next master will pass the old masters directly to you. Of course, you don't often hear these big truths. But with the current situation, second master, if you go back and do something wrong, you'll become a prisoner. What's there to be picky about? Once you're in the prison, you'll be shackled, and whipped with cold water. Then all the injustice will cease. Fei Lian. Fei Ying saw Fei Lian's outrageous words and scolded in a low voice, "We're just bringing people back. Do you have the life to meddle in other people's business? Don't be rude to second master." Fei Lian snorted when he heard this. He thought about it for a moment and decided not to say anything else. He didn't want to infuriate Bai Yunfei so much that they would have to take care of him along the way. Lu Heng's originally soaring anger gradually subsided at this moment. After his heart calmed down, he began to analyze the current situation in his heart. He could already foresee that once he returned to the Lu clan, he would be convicted. The second branch had been worried about not being able to establish a relationship with Li Qitian. How could they let go of such a good opportunity? Lu Heng wasn't afraid of death, but he didn't want to die in such a cowardly manner. If there really came a day when he had to face death, he also hoped that he could die with a bang and a meaningful death. He didn't want to be deceived and kidnapped by two servants and then handed over to the Titan like a tribute by Li Qitian. But in the current situation, other than pretending to be calm and follow the two back, and then looking for an opportunity to escape, he couldn't think of a better way. Fortunately, Lu Heng was quite familiar with the temperament of these two people, so it wasn't difficult for them to let down their guard. Seeing that Lu Heng didn't say anything and only closed his eyes in silence, the two didn't know what to do. Fei Ying said, "Let's hurry up a bit more. This time, let me carry him." Fei Lian frowned, "Carry him again? Second master isn't a child." Fei Ying scolded Fei Lian's stupidity in his heart. No matter how good Lu Heng's physique was, it was impossible for him to really hurry up if he didn't want to. Were they going to be delayed by Lu Heng's footsteps all the way? It would be better for them to take turns to carry him. When they arrived at Dezhou, they would hire a carriage and tie him up in it, then everything would be done. Fei Ying was happy in his heart. He bent down and forced Lu Heng to get up, then he turned around and forced Lu Heng to carry Lu Heng on his back with the help of Fei Lian. The two continued to move forward with Lu Heng. Who knew that just when the two were in a relaxed mood, there was a sudden gust of wind behind them. As soon as Fei Ying turned around, he saw a figure flashing in front of him. Before he could react, the weight on his back was lighter. "Ah!" Fei Ying said angrily, "What are you doing?" When he saw the person clearly, Fei Ying's face suddenly became ugly. Because the person who came was none other than Chao Yuqing. In Fei Ying and Fei Lian's impression, Chao Yuqing was someone who treated Qin Yining wholeheartedly like a mother. Who knew that this weak woman would be so skilled that she could snatch him away in the time it took them to take a breath? It was no wonder that she could find Qin Yining on her own. With such skills, there was no need to worry about anything else. At this time, the sound of horse hooves came from not far away in the forest. Then, they saw Qin Yining, Uncle Arhan, the three people from the Qingtian alliance, and two people from the Minuo tribe coming over on the official road. When they got closer, they slowed down. This time, Fei Lian and Fei Ying were really shocked. How could they have known that Qin Yining would bring people to chase after them? When Lu Heng saw Qin Yining, a strong smile appeared on her dejected face that had just suffered a heavy blow. "How did you know I was here?" Qin Yining blinked his long eyelashes. He didn't tell him that Liao Zhibing had put a tracking insect in him. He only said, "The people around me saw a figure leaving, and there was no one in your tent, so they chased after you." "Second Master Lu, are you okay?" Lu Heng smiled and shook his head, "I'm fine." His smile was really forced. Qin Yining didn't take it seriously, nor did he force him. He turned and walked towards Fei Ying and Fei Lian. Chao Yuqing and Liao Zhibing followed him on his left and right, looking at Fei Ying and Fei Lian with caution. Looking up at Qin Yining, who was getting closer and closer, and meeting his eyes that were like a cold beast, Fei Ying and Fei Lian didn't have the heart to admire the beauty. They only thought about how to get away safely. Qin Yining stood not far from the two with his hands behind his back. He lowered his head and asked, "Who ordered you to come here? Are they the second master and third master of your residence? Or did you come here on your own to capture second master Lu and ask for a reward?" When Lu Heng heard this, his whole body trembled with anger. Fei Ying and Fei Lian's expressions were also very ugly. Chapter 521. Qin Yining almost laughed at his self-righteous tone. "Your young master. Now, you've become a loyal servant who protects his master. But you disregarded your young master's wishes and forcibly kidnapped him, wanting to use him in exchange for your future. Now you have the face to say such things. What do you mean you're doing this for your majesty? Do you think I'm a fool? You're just doing this for your own personal gain. You really have the nerve to flatter yourself." Qin Yining slowly paced in front of the two, looking at them with a disdainful gaze. "If you're talking about the thickness of your skin, no one would be able to claim first place. This little girl really has a whole new level of respect for you. Admirable, admirable." Fei Lian and Fei Ying were angered by Qin Yining to the point that their faces turned red. They didn't expect that a person who looked soft and weak would be like an owl when she ridiculed people. She wouldn't stop until they were badly mutilated. Fei Lian's temper was irritable. He scolded angrily, "You're a woman, yet you don't know your place at home. You only know how to cause trouble outside all day. Now you're surrounded by Titan pursuers. If you don't find a way out, I'm afraid you'll be left behind in this foreign country. You're from Dezhou, so you should find a way to return to Dezhou. I advise you to hand over second master Lu to us and bring him back. Perhaps our second master will put in a few good words for you on account of your meritorious service. Then you'll be able to live a stable life in Dezhou in the future. After all, you're a woman. Don't tell me your majesty will argue with a woman like you." Although Fei Ying's words were unpleasant, his reasoning was clear. Although the two Minuo tribesmen who came with Uncle Arhan didn't understand what they were saying, Uncle Arhan did. The current situation was indeed as Fei Ying said. The Minuo tribe had angered Eugene Khan by robbing the provisions. Now they were fleeing with a large amount of supplies. Their predicament was unavoidable because they were in the territory of the Titan. In the end, they were still Titan people. But Qin Yining and Lu Heng weren't. They could actually leave right now. However, during the most difficult time, neither Lu Heng nor Qin Yining had any intention of backing down. They would live and die with the people of the Minuo tribe. Uncle Arhan was so moved that even his face turned red from excitement. Qin Yining didn't pay attention to Arhan's thoughts. He only felt that these two betrayed their former master and still acted so righteously. It was truly abominable. He immediately said, "Take them down." Fei Ying and Fei Lian hurriedly retreated. Fei Lian did not forget to threaten, "Qin, I advise you to be sensible and think about your family. If you let us go now, we can put in a few good words for you." Liao Zhibing's sarcasm was too piercing. The two men's faces were already red and purple. Lu Heng became more and more hesitant. Rationally, he knew that he shouldn't let them go, but emotionally, he couldn't bear to kill the people who used to follow him. Seeing Lu Heng in such a dilemma, everyone felt a little helpless in their hearts. Chao Yuqing chuckled softly. Her voice was soft and melodious. "If we let such scum go, then wouldn't the heavens punish us? Second master, I beg you to spare us. We know we were wrong. second master. Fei Ying and Fei Lian saw that their lives were in danger and hurriedly kowtowed to Lu Heng. Their hands were tied, and only their legs were free. Because they were too anxious, their foreheads were bleeding after 2 or 3 kowtows. Even in the darkness of the night, with the help of the moonlight and snow, they looked very miserable and pitiful. In the end, they were people who used to follow him for so long. Even if he raised a cat or a dog, he would still have feelings for them, let alone a living person. At this moment, emotions defeated reason. Lu Heng said softly, "You can go." Lu Heng now only felt despair. His family had decided to sacrifice him, and his trusted subordinates had betrayed him. This made Lu Heng feel extremely confused. He didn't even know if he should continue to support them. Everyone looked at each other, but when they saw that Lu Heng had made up his mind, they didn't say anything for a while. Fei Ying and Fei Lian were overjoyed. They hurriedly jumped up and ran out of the forest. They didn't even care about the ropes that tied their arms. Lu Heng turned and walked to the place where the horses were tied. "Let's go back." Qin Yining looked at Lu Heng's back and shook his head helplessly. He followed Uncle Arhan and the others. Chao Yuqing raised her eyebrows and looked at Liao Zhibing. Liao Zhibing nodded and quietly took 2 steps back with Chao Yuqing. Then, like lightning, they used their qinggong to leave. After a while, the 2 of them used their qinggong to return. They followed behind everyone and got on their horses as if nothing had happened. Qin Yining and Chao Yuqing rode together and gave their horses to Lu Heng. Except for Lu Heng, who was in a daze, everyone noticed that Liao Zhibing and Chao Yuqing had left for a while. Qin Yining, especially, had always had sharp senses. Even if the 2 of them used their qinggong to leave, she would have noticed that something was wrong before they ran out. Qin Yining didn't think about what happened to Fei Lian and Fei Ying because there was no need to think about it. After all, Chao Yuqing and Liao Zhibing wouldn't allow any possibility of their whereabouts being exposed. Everyone quickly rushed back to the camp. On the way, they were very anxious. They were afraid that during the time they were out, something unexpected would happen in the camp. As a result, when they reached the periphery of the camp, they really saw the marks of horses' hooves on the snow. They weren't messy and looked like they were left by scouts. When the group returned to the camp, they went directly to Harbala and Shigambala. The 2 brothers didn't dare to sleep too deeply. When they heard footsteps, they immediately woke up. When they saw that it was the group that had returned, they sighed in relief. "What's the situation outside?" Qin Yining said. "The situation isn't good. When we came back, we found the tracks left by scouts. We should leave here as soon as possible." The group's expressions were quite serious, causing Harbala and Shigambala to become nervous. "Then I'll go tell the people to prepare to leave camp." "All right." Harbala took some people to wake up the people and prepare to leave. Qin Yining and Uncle Arhan discussed what to do next. Chao Yuqing looked back at Lu Heng. Seeing that he was still deep in thought at this juncture, she couldn't help but frown. She went up to him and whispered, "Second Master Lu, are you still thinking about those 2 traitors?" Lu Heng seemed to be startled by the sudden voice. He suddenly raised his head and met Chao Yuqing's gaze. His lips moved, but he didn't say anything. Chao Yuqing laughed coldly and said, "You're aware that I killed the 2 of them, right?" Lu Heng's face instantly became even uglier. "You really killed them?" His tone wasn't surprised. Obviously, he already knew. "I always knew that Second Master Lu was a famous person. To be able to start from scratch at such a young age, your talent wouldn't lose to any successful person. But now, it seems that you also have moments of indecisiveness. You must know that once they leave and expose our whereabouts, the entire Minyo tribe will be buried with you because of a moment of pity." Now is the critical moment. The Titan's pursuers are coming. Do you still have time to feel sorry for yourself? Think about it yourself. Chao Yuqing spat out these harsh words and turned around to leave. Chapter 522. Translator, Transin Editor, Transin Interception. Qin Yining's group decided on their route within the time it took for a stick of incense to burn. By this time, all the tribesmen were ready to set off. Knowing that they were being chased, all the tribesmen were very quiet. They just followed the main group in an orderly manner, heading west through the wind and snow. Sure enough, not long after, a group of nearly 1,000 people arrived at the place where the Minuo tribesmen had set up camp. The cavalrymen pulled on the reins and urged their horses to circle around the camp. The general who led the group jumped off his horse and squatted down at the spot where the campfire used to be but was now covered by a layer of snow. He then waved his fist angrily. What a bunch of cunning bastards. They were just a little late. If they had come a little earlier and fought with these people, would they not have been able to snatch the food back? Now that the Khan was furious and their superiors were urging them to hurry, if they could not get the food back, once the Khan became angry, they were afraid that they would not have a good ending. General, what should we do? This snow came at the wrong time. Now that everything is white and they have been running for a while, it won't be easy to track them down. Even if it's not easy, we still have to chase after them. I don't believe that they can be faster than us when they bring their supplies with them. Everyone, keep your spirits up. We must give the Khan a perfect explanation. Otherwise, I'm sure none of us want to see the consequences. His words made everyone's hair stand on end. Even if the Khan was an extremely wise and reasonable person, if they could not complete a single task that he had sent them, it would be because of their incompetence. Moreover, this time, they had lost the most important food supplies to start a war. The group of people carefully checked the footprints left behind in the snow and moved closer to the Minuo tribe. At the same time, Qin Yining also received the news brought back by the scouts. You mean? There is already a group of nearly 1,000 cavalrymen chasing after us? Lu Heng asked in Taiden with a grave expression. The scout said, yes, I'm not mistaken. Every one of them is riding a horse. At first glance, we can tell that they are different from the small groups we encountered before. Patriarch, what should we do now? In the hearts of the people of the Minuo tribe, Qin Yining and Lu Heng were their chiefs. When Lu Heng had fainted in the desert, they had relied on Qin Yining's command to survive. Therefore, the people of the Minuo tribe trusted and respected Qin Yining more than they respected Lu Heng. When the scout asked this question, he looked at Qin Yining expectantly. However, Qin Yining couldn't understand what he was saying. Lu Heng told Qin Yining everything he had just said. Finally, he said, now that the situation is so tense, what should we do? Should we fight or continue to run? Qin Yining's eyebrows were tightly knitted together. She was so anxious that she bit her lip so hard that it was bleeding. The situation is not good. Qin Yining said solemnly, the other party has arranged for a group of cavalry. Although we also have horses, we are carrying so many supplies. Moreover, not everyone can ride a horse. If we just focus on running, I'm afraid it won't be long before they catch up to us. How could Lu Heng not know the seriousness of the situation? However, the people of the Minuo tribe were very united to begin with. These people who had crossed the desert together were not only related to each other, many of them had also developed strong feelings for each other. At this time, no matter who they decided to leave, it was impossible. Therefore, it was impossible for them to let some of them get on their horses and leave first. Do you think that with these provisions, we should give up these provisions? Yes. If we don't bring the supplies, the pursuers might not chase after us so closely. Lu Heng said in a low voice, I don't think the pursuers' mission is to kill us all. They just want to find the provisions. Qin Yining was silent. I don't think so. Oh. What do you mean? Lu Heng asked. Qin Yining said slowly, the loss of the provisions doesn't mean that Si Qin won't be held accountable just because they found the provisions. Lu Heng was suddenly enlightened. He said in a low voice, I understand. In their current situation, if they left the rations behind and ran away, the other party would only be able to find the rations as a lost item at most. Si Qin would still have to catch them and interrogate them. Regardless of whether Si Qin's goal was the provisions or to hold them accountable, the soldiers below didn't know what Lu Heng was thinking. They only wanted to make sure that they didn't leave any loopholes for the pursuers to catch. As such, even if they put down the rations, it was very likely that they would continue to be hunted until they were caught. Once they were caught and fell into Si Qin's hands, she would have even more reason to start a war with the Great Zhou. The more he thought about it, the more terrifying it was. Uncle Arhan heard the conversation between Qin Yining and Lu Heng loud and clear. He whispered these words to Harbala, and several other respected clansmen in the group. Everyone's expression was very serious. Everyone discussed for a while and finally disagreed. We will never hand over the provisions. We took the provisions for the future of our tribesmen. There are still many old people and children waiting for us to bring the provisions back. Even if we die, we will never hand over the provisions. Uncle Arhan agreed with these words. That's right. I don't agree with handing over the grain either. Eugene Khan is Inari Khan's husband. They're both tyrants. Even if there's temporary peace now, if we live under his rule in the future, our Minuo tribe will be completely destroyed by him sooner or later. Rather than live a miserable life, it's better to fight for our lives now. Lu Heng heard this and couldn't help but laugh when he looked at Qin Yining. It seems like you understand everyone better. Qin Yining smiled bitterly and waved his hand. This is a choice we have no choice but to make. If there is a choice, who would want to put themselves in danger? Lu Heng sighed. Yes. Uncle Arhan said, since it's decided, which direction should we continue to go? Lu Heng took out a map from his pocket. This was a simple map drawn by the Minuo tribesmen who were familiar with the terrain. The general landform and direction were marked very accurately. We are here now. Lu Heng pointed to a place in Taitan near the western border of Dezhou. The pursuers are all cavalry and they are very fast. They are not only after the provisions, they will definitely pursue us with all their strength. If we follow the original plan and use the advantages of the weather and the terrain to hide, they will catch up very quickly. Uncle Arhan said, I didn't expect that they would still catch up to us even after we chose such a barren place in the west. If we fight at close quarters, we will not be able to gain any advantage. Many tribesmen will die for this. So we have to choose a direction where they can't catch up to us. But which direction can they not catch up to us? They are cavalry. Qin Yining looked at the map and murmured, it's impossible to escape now. Either we stay here and wait for death, or we are caught and killed. Or we choose a direction where they don't dare to chase us. You mean? Lu Heng looked at the no man's land not far from them on the map in horror. You don't mean this area, do you? Qin Yining pointed his white index finger at the place Lu Heng was talking about and nodded. Yes, it's here. It was a desert. It was different from the desert they had crossed before. Although the desert they had crossed before was full of danger, they knew that as long as they went in the right direction, it would be a shortcut to Dezhou and the Taitan capital. If they were well prepared, they would be able to travel through the desert much faster than on the official road. But the desert Qin Yining was talking about was different. This was a real no man's land. Because this desert was too big, no one had ever walked out of this desert. No one knew where the other side of the desert was, or what was there. No one knew if there was an oasis in the desert. If they broke into this death zone, they might not be able to survive. Uncle Arhan told the tribesmen about the conversation between Qin Yining and Lu Heng. The tribesmen were silent. Everyone was shrouded in fear. I can't make a decision for everyone, so I'm just making a suggestion. As for whether or not we should take this path, it's still up to everyone. But according to my understanding of Eugene Khan, when he finds the provisions, he will also capture people to vent his anger. If we are captured, our tribesmen might not have a good ending. If we are outside, we will be easily captured. The consequences will be unimaginable. In any case, we will die outside, so we might as well go in and take a risk. Seeing that we have entered this desert, the pursuers will definitely not dare to chase after us. They are doing this for the sake of glory and wealth. How could they really disregard their lives and rush into the desert directly? Maybe we can wait until they leave. Or maybe we can walk out of the desert. Lu Heng said, but it's more likely that we won't be able to walk out of the desert and die together. Qin Yining nodded, yes. This is the most likely scenario. But if we stay and get caught, we will also die. The conversation between the two of them caused the surrounding people to fall silent. Arhan thought for a long time, then said in a deep voice, you can go. Qin Yining and Lu Heng both raised their heads and looked at Arhan. Uncle Arhan said, you don't have to go with us. Our tribesmen decided not to hand over the provisions and fight to the death with Eugene Khan because of the hatred of our tribesmen. But you too are not Taytan people. Our tribesmen are already very grateful that you are willing to come with us until now. Now that we are on the border of Dezhou and you too are protected by experts, it shouldn't be difficult for you to bypass the pursuers and directly enter Dezhou. Go back to your country, don't follow us. Lu Heng and Qin Yining heard this and couldn't help but sigh. Chapter 523. I won't leave. Qin Yining looked at the simple faces filled with concern and reluctance. Her heart, which had not wavered in the slightest, became even more resolute. Indeed, she could bypass the pursuers under the protection of Chao Yuqing and the Qingtian alliance and find a safe place to hide. After this wave of pursuit, perhaps she could disguise herself and sneak back to Dezhou. Perhaps she could hide her identity in Taytan and find a way to hide. That way, she would definitely be able to survive. But what about after that? They were companions who had gone through thick and thin together. When danger came, she would cower and run away, leaving all the consequences to her companions. Would she still have a conscience for the rest of her life? Qin Yining had never been a person who was afraid of death. Even though she was reluctant to part with life after being together with Pang Shao, she would not change her bottom line because of this. There were things a man should do and things he should not do. Even though she was a woman, her heart did not lose to a man's. Moreover, if it were not for the sake of helping her and Lu Heng leave, why would the people of the Minyo tribe go through the trouble of angering Si Qin? Even if they could not survive the oppression in Dadu, why couldn't they find a time to leave without attracting attention? Why did they have to be tied to these two troublesome people? If it were not for the sake of keeping their promise and keeping their promise, who would be so foolish? Although Qin Yining thought a lot, it only took a few breaths. Lu Heng also smiled and said, what a coincidence. I don't plan to leave either. Qin Yining looked at Lu Heng. Coincidentally, Lu Heng also tilted his head and looked over. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Qin Yining knew that Lu Heng had the same idea as her. Chao Yuqing, who had been watching Qin Yining with her lips tightly pursed, sighed and lowered her eyes in disappointment. Uncle Arhan looked at them with a complicated expression on his face. He didn't say anything for a long time. Even if he had a sword on his neck, he wouldn't shed a single tear. But now, He was so moved that his eyes turned red. Although the other clansmen didn't understand what Qin Yining and Lu Heng were talking about, they could guess what was going on when they saw the smiles on their faces and Uncle Arhan's expression. Arhan took a deep breath and told his people what they meant. This time, there were a few more people who were touched. Everyone hurriedly tried to persuade them to leave. However, due to the language barrier, Qin Yining couldn't understand what they were saying. Lu Heng could understand, but he just smiled and shook his head, indicating that they didn't need to persuade him anymore. They looked at Arhan for help. Uncle Arhan still wanted to persuade him, but Qin Yining waved his hand and said, "Uncle, you don't have to persuade me anymore. I've already made up my mind." Qin Yining turned around and looked at Chao Yuqing. He smiled and said, "Let's say our goodbyes here. Aunt Chao, there's really no need for you to go into the desert with me. I'm with so many clansmen, and we have enough supplies. I'm sure there won't be any problems. Besides, my father needs someone to protect him. I don't want to go into the desert and worry about my father's situation. Besides, I'm counting on you to tell my father about my situation." He then turned to Liao Zhibing and the Zhao brothers. "There's no need for the three of you to continue seeing me off. Go back to the border and live your lives as usual. I believe that our alliance members will be able to live a stable life." Liao Zhibing frowned. His lips moved for a long time, but he didn't say anything to refuse. Qin Yining sighed in relief when he saw that Liao Zhibing didn't insist on going into the desert with him. Chao Yuqing stared at Qin Yining. Her face was tense. "I really want to knock you out and take you away. Aunt Chao, since you said that, I won't do it." Qin Yining smiled. "I'm very happy that you can handle this matter rationally." "But you're not rational," Chao Yuqing said anxiously. "If I let you lose your life, how will I face your father in the future?" "Aunt Chao, I'm not being irrational. I just have my own bottom line. I believe that even if my father finds out about my decision, he won't oppose it even if he feels bad for me. There are some things that I can't do in this world. If I do, I'll have to live in guilt for the rest of my life. I don't want to be that kind of person. I hope that Aunt Chao can understand." Chao Yuqing gritted her teeth and spat. "Little hussy, if I didn't understand you, I would have already taken you away like a bag." Qin Yining knew that Chao Yuqing was in a difficult position, but he wouldn't change his mind. He just smiled at her apologetically. After thinking for a moment, Qin Yining sighed and said, "Aunt Chao, I'll have to trouble you to pass a message to Wang Yi." "What message?" Qin Yining smiled bitterly and said, "I've already lost everything I have while running for my life. I don't have anything to give him. Aunt Chao, tell him not to worry about me. I'm very lucky. Even a wolf can't eat me. I'll definitely survive. Also, ask him to take good care of my parents for me. Also, ask him to take care of Bing Tang and Xiao Kanji for me." Qin Yining hesitated for a moment, but he still moved closer to Chao Yuqing's ear and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "If the imperial court really doesn't tolerate him in the future, I believe that he won't be a pushover. If he can gain the trust of the former officials of Beiji, ask Xiao Kanji to take him to the mountain where I found Xiao Kanji. If he can find the location of her old residence, he'll be able to gain something." Chao Yuqing looked at Qin Yining in surprise. Qin Yining only smiled at her and said, "Aunt Chao, help me take care of him. Don't tell him this for now. If you wait 3 to 5 years and make sure that by then, there won't be any room between him and your majesty. If he's still the Pang Zhishi who cares about the safety of the people, you can tell him. Otherwise, this secret will only rot in your heart. You can't even tell my father. This is my last request. Aunt Chao, can you do it?" Chao Yuqing saw that Chao Yuqing was indifferent to life and death and was calmly making arrangements for her funeral. She felt very uncomfortable and said with a cold face, "You can tell this to him in the future. I won't get involved in the matters between you and your father. You won't die. Don't worry. I know that. There's no time to lose. You should leave quickly." Qin Yining urged Chao Yuqing, Liao Zhibing, and Zhao Yinhua to leave quickly. Chao Yuqing pursed her lips and stood up. She angrily pinched Qin Yining's face and said, "You're such a worrisome girl." Then she turned and strode away. Liao Zhibing, Zhao Yinhua, and Zhao Wanjin saluted Qin Yining and said, "Alliance Chief, we're leaving. I won't see you off. Be careful." Qin Yining also saluted back. Uncle Arhan and the tribesmen of the Minuo tribe saw that Qin Yining had sent all of their people away, but she was determined not to leave. They were even more moved. They felt that Qin Yining was a woman after all. She had a family in Dezhou and a husband who loved her. If she went back, she would be able to live a good life. Compared to Lu Heng, who had a family and couldn't go back, Qin Yining's position in their hearts was even higher. Qin Yining saw that Chao Yuqing and the others had left with their horses, so she turned around and said, "Since we've decided, let's prepare enough water and get ready to leave." "Okay." Uncle Arhan nodded and immediately led his men to urge the tribesmen to prepare. At the same time, he spread the news that Qin Yining and Lu Heng were unwilling to leave for their common survival. Chapter 524. Although they were mentally prepared, none of them had expected the pursuers to arrive so quickly. On the way to the no man's land, if not for Qin Yining and Lu Heng, who had timed their escape, they would have had a close encounter with the 1,000 cavalrymen. The pursuers could only chase after the Minuo tribe, and could not find any other way to vent their anger, other than kicking over the remains of the campfire in the campsite. "General, something is wrong with these traitors of the Minuo tribe. The direction they are fleeing in is obviously the no man's land." The general waved his hand with a solemn face, stopping his subordinates from talking. His mind was in a mess. Obviously, the Minuo tribe had no other choice but to bring their supplies to the vast desert in the no man's land. They would rather die than hand over their provisions. The slaves were happy, but what about the men who were ordered to chase after the Minuo tribe? When the time came, could they go to the Khan and say, "I'm so ashamed, we couldn't even catch up with a group of old, weak, and disabled soldiers with supplies even though we were riding on horses. We even chased them into the no man's land, and we didn't dare to chase after them." If they said that, none of them would be able to live. Chase after them. Speed up. We have to catch up with them before they enter the no man's land. Seeing the general panicking, the men who were usually calm became anxious. They hurriedly urged the soldiers, who were drinking cold water and eating dry rations, to get on their horses and chase after the Minuo tribe. Who would dare to slack off when it came to a matter of life and death? However, they had chased all the way from the campsite to the desert, yet they did not catch up with even half a shadow. The hooves of the horses stomped on the sand, and they watched as the strong wind blew past. In the blink of an eye, a sand dune that was originally quite large was turned into a flat sand field. It was impossible to track them. Then, they looked at the vast desert in front of them. Everyone tightened their reins timidly, not daring to take even half a step forward. The general's face was ashen. He waved his fist in the air, as if he could wave away the grievance in his heart. "General, what should we do?" The deputy general looked at the no man's land, which was constantly changing under the harsh weather, and swallowed his saliva in fear. At this time, if they were to continue chasing, he believed that not many of these brothers would have the guts to charge in. Everyone knew how terrifying the desert in the no man's zone was. The weather was terrible, and the landscape was constantly changing. Flat ground could turn into sand dunes in a quarter of an hour. Perhaps one could be buried alive by the sand after a night's sleep. Moreover, there was no way to find a way forward because no one knew how far the other side of the no-man's zone was or what was there. Entering this place was equivalent to having half of one's body in hell. No one had the guts to challenge it. Those lunatics of the Minuo tribe. The general spat on the ground, then clenched his teeth and said, "Set up a defense here and keep an eye on the area around the no-man's land. I don't believe that these Minuo clan people are not afraid of death. They have about the same number of people as us. Maybe some of them will escape soon. If things go wrong, we might even get caught up in their internal strife. When the time comes, we'll capture one of them alive. That way, we'll be able to justify ourselves. The general is wise." Everyone saluted and secretly sighed in relief. As long as he didn't let them rush in to capture him, anything was fine. The pursuers split into groups and set up camp outside the no-man's land. They were just waiting to open up a big net and catch a big catch. But how could these people understand the stubbornness and unity of the Minuo tribe? At this time, Qin Yining was leading a group of people through a busy desert. The strong wind blew sand into the gaps in her headscarf. Sometimes, the wind was so strong that she almost fell down. But she still held on, leading a horse that was dragging rice and water bags, and walking at the front of the group. Lu Heng also led his horse and followed closely beside her. Several times, when her slender body was almost unable to walk due to the wind, he reached out to support her. But his hand never fell on her. Instead, he opened his arms and protected her like a guardian. Looking at the two people at the front of the group, Uncle Arhan, Shigambala, and Harbala felt a little sour in their hearts. They could all see that Lu Heng liked Qin Yining, but they could also see that Qin Yining's heart was tied to her husband. She simply regarded Lu Heng as a trustworthy companion. Now that they had embarked on this journey together, with every step they took, they seemed to be closer to death. At this time, it seemed that it was unnecessary to care about who liked who and who accepted who. If they could leave this no-man's land alive, it would be because the heavens pitied them. They were not meant to die. Although they were also afraid, facing this endless desert, they couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. However, none of them complained, because if they had stayed in Dadu, they might have been tortured to death by the Tatar court. The nightmare of being enslaved, oppressed, exploited, and wantonly slaughtered finally woke up. They could control their own life and death. Even in such a tragic way, as long as they had their companions by their side, they were satisfied. Just as Qin Yining's group entered the no-man's land and the pursuers set up a large net outside the desert, waiting for them to run out, in the imperial palace of Dezhou, Li Qitian stared at Li Guanwen in front of him with a gloomy face and said, "What did you say? Say it again for me." Li Guanwen was so scared that he knelt down with a plop and kowtowed repeatedly, "Your Majesty, please calm down." This servant did indeed hear that Prince Zhongshuan took his personal guards out of the city. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Qitian grabbed a teacup and fiercely smashed it on the marble floor. With a crisp sound, the broken pieces of porcelain splashed onto Li Guanwen's face, scraping several bloody marks. He didn't even dare to blink. "Your Majesty, please calm down." Li Qitian stood up angrily and angrily pounded the memorials on the table with his large palm. "Peng Zhishi, what a Peng Zhishi. He actually dares to ignore me to this extent. Disobeying an imperial decree once is a capital offense. I really didn't want his life, but he actually dares to cause trouble. He actually took his guards and ran away. Does he want to rebel? Come, surround the Prince Zhongshuan's residence. I want to personally ask those two old things of the Yao family and that cheap woman how they teach their son. Your Majesty is in a fit of anger. Who dares to say half a word in front of me, Tani?" Li Guanwen hurriedly complied and led his men to prepare for Your Majesty's departure from the palace. At this time, 50 li outside the city gates, Ji Ziyu was wearing a red fox fur coat that seemed to be burning with flames. He was sitting upright on the silver-white steed that Pang Xiao had given him. His fair and slender hand held a pitch-black horsewhip as he stood in the middle of the small path. Pang Xiao reined in his black horse and smiled in surprise. "All on. Why are you here?" Ji Ziyu shook the reins and urged his horse closer. Although the Jinghu Wei behind Pang Xiao didn't show any change in expression, everyone's body tensed up. Ji Ziyu's long brows slightly furrowed and his dignified gaze swept over them. This caused the Jinghu Wei behind Pang Xiao to feel uneasy, and their sharpness was greatly restrained. "You want to find the Qin clan. You can't bear it anymore." Pang Xiao's straight brows also furrowed as he nodded. "These past few days, my heart has been very flustered. I keep feeling that if I don't go, something will happen to Sister Yi." Ji Ziyu frowned as he looked at Pang Xiao's handsome face that had become even more angular after losing weight. He pursed his lips and said, "You care about her that much?" "All on, she is as important as my life in my heart." "But didn't you say before that a man doesn't have to worry about not having a wife? No matter how good the Qin clan is, can her life compete with the lives of everyone around you? If you leave now, aren't you afraid that your family will be implicated? I believe that even if something happens to the Qin clan, she still hopes that you can live well and take care of your family, as well as her parents. She won't leave the capital on impulse like this. You have to know that your current actions are touching your Majesty's reverse scale." Ji Ziyu was a cold person who didn't speak much, but when it came to Pang Xiao's matters, he would change his usual habits. Pang Xiao's expression changed as he jumped off the horse. His black sable fur cloak was raised, revealing his long and powerful legs that were hidden under the cloak and covered by black trousers. He threw the whip to Huzi behind him and walked towards Ji Ziyu. Ji Ziyu also jumped off the horse and walked towards Pang Xiao with a frown. He frowned so much that a wrinkle appeared on his forehead. The fire fox fur coat made his jade-like skin look even fairer. Pang Xiao sighed as he patted his shoulder and said in a low voice, "While your Majesty still trusts you, you have to think of a way out as soon as possible. Don't be caught off guard when something really happens." Ji Ziyu stared at Pang Xiao. "If you don't act on impulse, your Majesty will also trust you. I'm the one talking to you now, why are you talking to me?" Pang Xiao couldn't help but laugh. "You're still the same as when you were young. If you're happy, say it out loud. You just have to be stubborn." Ji Ziyu stared at Pang Xiao again, but he didn't refute him. He only asked, "Are you sure you want to go?" "Yes. I have to go, or I'll regret it for the rest of my life." "You're obviously not a person who acts on impulse. Where's the calmness that you've gained after so many years of experience? You said that you don't want to regret it for the rest of your life, but in life, there are always a lot of helpless choices that you have to make. How can you really never regret it?" "All on, I know that you have good intentions. I've already sent my grandparents and mother to the family Qin. Father-in-law knows that I'm going out, so he should help me take care of things at home." Ji Ziyu saw that Pang Xiao had made up his mind and there was no room for negotiation. He could only sigh and say, "If you want to go, then go. Don't worry, I'll help you take care of things." Pang Xiao nodded emotionally and said, "You have to be careful too. Remember what I said and prepare for a way out." Ji Ziyu smiled faintly. "Don't worry, I'm different from you. You have a lot of worries, and I don't have any family. I'm not afraid of anything. How can I really be at ease?" No one would have thought that the three of us would come to this point. "All on, take care. I'll try my best to come back as soon as possible." Chapter 525. Pang Xiao took the black horsewhip and looked at the tassels at the tip and the pendant at the handle. He couldn't help but be moved. Then you can use mine first. He walked to Huzi's side and took the horsewhip that he had used for many years. He then handed it to Jiziyu. Jiziyu took it and shook the horsewhip in his hand. He smiled and said, "Okay, I'll take it as a gift from you. Let's go. It's getting late." Pang Xiao nodded. He suddenly opened his arms and hugged Jiziyu. The two of them were about the same height. They were both very tall. Pang Xiao was moved by Jiziyu's brotherly affection. He held Jiziyu's whip and gently hit Jiziyu's back twice. Jiziyu was surprised at first. He then slowly raised his hand and hugged Pang Xiao back. His peach blossom eyes revealed a warm smile that could not be hidden. "Good brother, wait for me to come back. Let's drink." "Okay, we won't go back until we're drunk." Jiziyu hit Pang Xiao's shoulder. Pang Xiao laughed loudly and hugged Jiziyu again. Then he turned around and mounted his horse. He waved to Jiziyu in high spirits, "Let's go." Jiziyu took Pang Xiao's horsewhip and led his silver-white horse back a few steps to make way. Jinghu Wei and the others followed behind Pang Xiao. They rode past Jiziyu and quickly disappeared into the distance. Jiziyu finally tightened his grip on the horsewhip that Pang Xiao gave him. He returned to his expressionless self and mounted his horse, urging it to return to the capital. He did not immediately return to his prince consort's residence. Instead, he made a detour to the family Qin. However, because he was worried that there would be spies around the family Qin, he did not dare to show his face and only glanced at them from afar. Just as he turned a corner in the alley, he saw a group of people coming to a halt at the end of the alley, facing the family Qin's entrance. The leader of the group was riding a tall red horse. He was wearing a mink fur cloak and a warm hat with a mink fur rim. His face was as calm as water as he dismounted from his horse under the service of a bowing man wearing an iron-gray cotton robe. Although he was far away, Jiziyu easily recognized that the person who had come was none other than Emperor Li Qitian, who was supposed to be at the top of the palace. Jiziyu hurriedly dismounted from his horse and hid on top of the wall. He cautiously peeked his head out to observe, but his brows were tightly furrowed in worry. At this time, Li Qitian was standing in front of the family Qin's entrance with a gloomy face and his hands clasped behind his back. Li Guanwen and a group of imperial bodyguards were in a panic. They carefully guarded the front, back, left, and right. When they went to the Prince Zhongshuan's residence, they unexpectedly found nothing. There were only servants left in the residence. Pang Xiao's maternal grandfather, his wife, and mother said that they had left early in the morning with a bundle to visit relatives. They did not know when they would return. How could it be such a coincidence that they left just like that? He had known Pang Xiao for a long time. How could the Yao family and the Pang family have any relatives to visit? It was obvious that they wanted to tease him. Good. Since they said that they wanted to visit relatives, wasn't their family's biggest in-law the family Qin? He wanted to see how the family Qin would react. If the Qin Huayuan really dared to cover up the secret stash as he guessed, then everything would be out of his control. In a fit of anger, Li Qitian had already lost his reason. He ordered in a deep voice, "Go and knock on the door." The attendants and imperial bodyguards did not dare to be negligent. They immediately complied and quickly went to knock on the door. The doorman answered very quickly. However, when he saw that the group of people standing in front of the door did not come with good intentions, he was nervous and did not know what to do. "Everyone, this is the Qin residence." "Who are you?" Li Qitian stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He was silent. Li Guanwen looked back at Li Qitian. In this situation, should he reveal his identity? Your Majesty did not express his position. It was really difficult for him to die. Li Guanwen criticized in his heart. He could only try to figure out your majesty's thoughts. He said, honored guests have arrived. Quickly go and ask your master to come out. The doorman looked doubtfully at the pale-faced, beardless, and luxuriously dressed man in front of him. He then looked at the middle-aged man beside him, whose face was as calm as water, as if he was suppressing his anger. He could not help but nod and say, this humble one will go now. As he spoke, he did not dare to hesitate. He quickly turned around and dashed into the residence. Compared to the servants of the Prince Zhongshuan residence, the servants of the family Qin residence were clearly more courteous and enthusiastic. Li Qitian's face was cold. When he saw that the other party's attitude towards him was so nervous, he felt a bit better. Even so, he still had no way to vent the anger in his heart. He had already ordered people to chase after Pang Xiao. If they did not chase after Pang Xiao, he could not guarantee that he would not take his anger out on them. In short, he needed to first see what Qin Huayuan's attitude would be. After a short while, the sound of footsteps could be heard from inside the residence. Soon after, the door opened. Qin Huayuan, who was wearing a dark blue silk robe that was neither new nor old, was standing inside. When he saw the people outside, he was so frightened that he wanted to kowtow on the spot. When Li Qitian saw this, he did not stop him. He clasped his hands behind his back and accepted his bow. When Qin Huayuan saw that Li Qitian was dressed casually, he did not dare to greet him. He only said, please come in. Although the servants accompanying him did not know Li Qitian's identity, they could tell from Qin Huayuan's attitude that this guest must be of high status. No one dared to neglect him in the slightest. They hurriedly went to tidy up the front hall and prepare tea and snacks. When they entered the residence, Li Qitian hesitated for a moment. In the end, he ordered the imperial bodyguards to stand guard outside the door. He only brought Li Guanwen inside. Qin Huayuan knew how to act appropriately and did not let the servants in to disturb them. When Li Qitian sat down, Qin Huayuan once again knelt down and bowed deeply. Only then did he dare to say, Your Majesty has graced my humble residence with your presence. This humble subject did not go out to meet you. Please forgive this humble subject for not going out to meet you. Li Qitian pursed his lips and stared at Qin Huayuan. He said in a deep voice, Beloved official Qin, do you know why we have come? Qin Huayuan was kneeling properly. When he heard Li Qitian's words, his eyes revealed confusion. He pondered for a moment and said, It seems that your Majesty has come because you sympathize with this humble subject. Your Majesty values this humble subject so much. This humble subject, shut up. Li Qitian angrily slammed the table. He leaned forward and gnashed his teeth as he said, Are you trying to play tricks in front of us? You clearly know why we have come, yet you are playing dumb in front of us. Beloved official Qin, we have always valued your talent and have never made things difficult for you because of your status as a humble subject. Is this how you repay us? Qin Huayuan's face turned pale. He hurriedly kowtowed and said, Your Majesty, please calm down. This humble subject does not understand your Majesty's meaning. If your Majesty has any orders for this humble subject, just tell me and this humble subject will do my best to carry them out. This humble subject is also aware of your Majesty's appreciation of my talents. This humble subject has always been conscientious in carrying out my tasks. This humble subject does not dare to disobey your Majesty's orders in the slightest. You can explain yourself however you want. Let us ask you, do you know that Pang Zhishi has left the capital? Li Qitian stared fixedly at Qin Huayuan's face. He did not want to miss any expression on his face. Qin Huayuan's eyes widened in astonishment. He said in disbelief, Your Majesty means that Prince Zhongshuan has left the capital? Your Majesty did not give him any orders. He is Chapter 526. Qin Huayuan was still deeply shocked. He was as dumb as a wooden chicken, as if he didn't notice Li Qitian's anger at all. Instead, he knelt on the ground. After a while, he stood up and asked, "What did Wang Yi do when he left the capital? Did he leave alone, or did he leave with someone? What about the rest of the people in the prince's residence? Are they in the residence?" Li Qitian looked at Qin Huayuan suspiciously. His shocked and helpless appearance wasn't fake. The confusion and astonishment in his eyes were also very real. Li Qitian had never seen Qin Huayuan like this. Even when he had just arrived in Dezhou as a surrendered official, he hadn't been so flustered when the other officials in the imperial court made things difficult for him. Perhaps Qin Huayuan also knew that Peng Zhixie's departure would place all the blame and pressure on him, his father-in-law's shoulders, so he was flustered. Li Qitian's suspicions lessened a bit. But even so, he still wouldn't trust Qin Huayuan. The servants of Prince Zhongshuan's residence said that before Peng Zhixie left with the soldiers, Peng Zhixie's maternal family and mother left with a bundle, saying that they were going to visit relatives. From what we know, that family's relatives are all dead, except for the family Qin. Let us ask you, did they come to your residence? Your Majesty, this subject doesn't dare to deceive you. This subject is on leave today and hasn't left the residence. I definitely didn't see the in-laws come to my residence. Your Majesty can ask the servants in my residence at will, and you can also order your subordinates to investigate at will. This subject has no objections. After expressing his loyalty emotionally, he kowtowed heavily. Li Qitian saw Qin Huayuan's sincerity, so his suspicions lessened a bit. But it was only a bit less. Since my beloved subject is so sincere, how can we not give you a chance to prove your innocence? If we don't thoroughly investigate the residence, people will say that there is something wrong with the Qin residence. Why don't we personally take charge today and have them investigate? What do you think? Your Majesty is merciful. This subject is deeply grateful. Qin Huayuan continued to kowtow. Li Qitian chuckled and looked at Li Guanwen. Li Guanwen immediately turned around and went to the door to summon the imperial bodyguards. Soon, the small courtyard of the Qin mansion became noisy. Because Li Guanwen had specifically instructed that Your Majesty was not here to search the family Qin's residence, and that Your Majesty wanted to continue to put Minister Qin in an important position. Therefore, the bodyguards did not dare to go too far. First, they did not want to damage the family's belongings. Second, they did not want to offend the womenfolk. But even so, the womenfolk led by Old Madam were so scared that their faces turned pale. They stood in the courtyard of the inner residence with a few servants serving them and watched those imperial bodyguards search the rooms one by one. The womenfolk did not know what had happened, but the womenfolk who had experienced a lot of family Qin in Dezhou felt cold in their hearts. It was as if they had returned to the time when they were ambushed and forced to abandon their family and work to come to Dezhou. The old madam wiped her tears and sobbed, "Truly sinful, sinful. What kind of sin have we committed to have such a thing happen again?" 8th young Miss and Qin Huaining supported the old madam on the left and right. Han's 2nd young mistress hid in the crowd with her child in her arms. When she saw the imperial bodyguards come out of the room, they didn't take any of the family's belongings. They didn't seem to be taking advantage of the situation to rob. She gathered her courage and asked, "What is everyone looking for? Tell us. Perhaps we can help." The members of the Sun clan, 2nd Old Madam, and Old Madam all turned around and glared at her. Provoking this group of fiends at this time, were they afraid that they wouldn't notice this family's womenfolk? Han's 2nd young mistress felt wronged by the glares, so she moved behind her husband, Qin Han. Qin Han, Qin Yu, and Qin Xian all stepped forward and shielded the womenfolk behind them. Because of Li Guanwen's instructions, the imperial bodyguards didn't want to make things difficult for the family Qin, so they asked, "Have you seen the old master, old madam, and old madam of Prince Zhongshuan's manor?" Old madam was stunned when she heard this. "You came to our manor to search for the in-laws' family?" Second old madam said, "Of course, we saw them when we visited relatives in the past, but we haven't seen them for a long time." The imperial bodyguards didn't say much to the womenfolk and went to the front hall to report. Seeing the men coming out in a single file, the whole family breathed a sigh of relief. Qin Han reprimanded second young mistress in a low voice, "In the future, we can't talk too much. You're the daughter-in-law and can let go, but can you also let go of your younger sisters?" Han's second young mistress was reprimanded until her face and ears turned red. She lowered her head and didn't dare to say anything. Seeing that Qin Han had disciplined his wife, old madam didn't say anything else. She turned around and instructed Mammy Qin in a low voice, "Quietly go to the front and see what's going on. Why did they come to our manor to search for the in-laws' family and make it seem like they're raiding our manor?" "Yes. Yes," Mother Qin replied and carefully walked towards the second gate. In the front hall, Li Qitian heard the imperial bodyguards report and saw the reactions of the rest of the people in the Qin manor. His suspicions disappeared a lot. Although he was still suspicious and felt that Qin Huaiyuan would definitely protect his son-in-law, he didn't have any solid evidence now. It was hard to pin any charges on Qin Huaiyuan. Moreover, the court was in turmoil now. The aristocratic families and the old officials of Beiji had seen what happened to Grand Secretary Liu and were more cautious about the court. The second son of the Liu family trusted the patriarch, but his rallying power and ability were limited. The nobles were keeping an eye on Pang Zhishi and Ji Ziyu. Once he made a move on them, the nobles would be alerted and it wouldn't be easy for them to make a move. The surrendered officials faction was already following Qin Huaiyuan's lead. Ever since the Yu Qiyan and Gu Shixiang were captured and imprisoned in the imperial prison, the surrendered officials faction was also in turmoil. If they made a move on Qin Huaiyuan now, the surrendered officials faction would also be in chaos. On top of that, the Taiden was eyeing covetously and trying to start a war. Li Qitian was already in a terrible fix. He had been under so much pressure for the past few days. The next day, Pang Xiao left with his soldiers without saying goodbye. Li Qitian couldn't control his temper anymore. However, looking at Qin Huaiyuan, who was kneeling on the ground and listening to his orders, Li Qitian weighed the pros and cons. In the end, he sighed and personally helped him up. He said with a pleasant expression, "It's just a misunderstanding. Please don't take it to heart." Qin Huaiyuan seemed to be very moved. He shook his head and said, "Your Majesty has to deal with a myriad of affairs every day and is truly overworked. The state's affairs are complicated. This subject is incompetent and can't share the burden with Your Majesty. Your Majesty's actions are understandable. This subject only hates myself for being so useless. The Taiden's affairs are so troublesome. This subject is a useless scholar and can't help relieve Your Majesty's worries." Qin Huaiyuan's words truly touched Li Qitian's heart. It's lonely at the top. As an emperor, what he hoped for the most was to be understood by others and not simply to be feared. Apart from the fact that Qin Huaiyuan's son-in-law was very troublesome, he actually liked Qin Huaiyuan very much. "Forget it." Li Qitian let out a long sigh and said, "This emperor was really angry. It seems like Pang Zhishi knew that we would ask you, so he didn't dare to tell you about his arrangements and where his family members are hiding. You have always been intelligent. Why don't you analyze what Pang Zhishi was doing when he took his mansion troops out? Is it possible that he went to contact the Dragon Stallion army?" Qin Huaiyuan remained silent for a moment before saying, "In my opinion, Wang Yi doesn't seem like someone who would do such a thing for no reason. He must be young and impetuous." At this point, Qin Huaiyuan's face blushed a little. Li Qitian raised his eyebrows and asked, "Oh. Even heroes have a weakness for the charms of beautiful women. Wang Yi is a sentimental person. In the past, he obeyed your majesty's every word. The things he did were all because he couldn't handle the charms of love. It's my fault for not teaching my daughter properly. Qin Huaiyuan was about to kneel down again as he spoke. My dear minister, there's no need for that. Li Qitian helped him up and ordered Qin Huaiyuan to sit down. Qin Huaiyuan was so grateful that he shed tears of gratitude. Then, he sat down on the chair and lowered his head to listen to orders. At this point, Li Qitian's anger subsided a little. Thinking back, he realized that whenever Pang Xiao didn't listen to him, it was for the sake of beautiful women. This included the last time when he disobeyed the imperial edict more than 30 times. Therefore, Pang Xiao was no longer the flawless person he used to be. Now, he had a weakness that no one could touch. This was indeed a good thing for him. After all, with a weakness in hand, the tool would be more useful. Li Qitian sighed and said, he was also reckless. With Taitan's current situation, what's the point of him bringing those troops? Does he really think that his troops are all celestial soldiers? For the sake of today, he should think about how to make peace. Your Majesty is right. Qin Huaiyuan saluted and said, right now, Taitan is clearly using this as a pretext to make a fuss. They want to invade Dezhou's borders. If we start a war, we'll cause misery and suffering. If we have money to support the war, it's better to use it on the common people. Repairing bridges, paving roads, trimming dams, or reducing taxes on the common people can also be used. In short, it's better than wasting the money in the national treasury. Li Qitian nodded repeatedly as he listened, you're right. However, the Taitan people don't think so. Qin Huaiyuan and Li Qitian began to discuss state affairs again. After Mammy Qin watched from a distance, she went back to report to the Dowager Duchess, the person who came might be one of Master's colleagues. He came in a threatening manner. When he found that our family is fine, he started to discuss business with Master. Only then did the Dowager Duchess's suspended heart completely fall back to its original position. However, after thinking about it for a while, she still felt that there was something strange about this matter. Send someone to search the prince's mansion again. Where did Madame's family go? The person who came to search the inner residence just now was looking for Madame's family. Did something serious happen? Mammy Qin heard this and immediately retreated to do as she was told. Not long after Li Qitian left, Qin Huaiyuan had just returned to the inner residence when the Dowager Duchess, who was frightened by the news that Mammy Qin had inquired, grabbed his hand and exhorted, don't pay attention to the Pang family. Their life and death have nothing to do with our family Qin. Your Majesty is looking for them. If we intervene in this matter, I'm afraid our family Qin will be implicated. Qin Huaiyuan had already guessed what the Dowager Duchess would say. He didn't want to make the Dowager Duchess think too much, so he agreed gently. The Dowager Duchess then pulled Qin Huaiyuan to discuss the marriage of the two daughters in the family. Qin Yining had been married for so long, but there was no news of any children. In fact, the Dowager Duchess still hoped to send Miss Tao Jr. to Prince Zhongshuan's mansion as a noble concubine. Chapter 527. Mother, Qin Huaiyuan said with displeasure in a deep voice, Sister Yi is my only daughter and your granddaughter. She has been kidnapped and we don't know if she is alive or dead. Instead of worrying about her situation, why are you thinking about arranging people to be by her husband's side? Is this what a grandmother should do? Qin Huaiyuan was thinking about his daughter's life and death. Also, he didn't know if your Majesty would be able to come back to her senses after getting away with it this time. He was even more worried that the location where he hid his in-laws' family of 3 would be discovered. These things had already made his mind chaotic. In addition, although the Titan had temporarily suspended the war due to the loss of provisions, who could be sure that the Titan didn't have provisions to support the war? What if Si Qin had the same idea as him and sent people off on horseback without bringing too many supplies? They would attack wherever there was provisions and charge all the way into Duzhou to plunder. At that time, wouldn't the people at the border suffer unspeakably? Qin Huaiyuan was already mentally and physically exhausted from thinking about these things. Yet, old Madam brought up this matter again after experiencing a battle of wits. No matter how patient he was, his patience had been completely worn away by her selfish words just now. Old Madam was stunned by her son's reprimand. She said in disbelief, Menggu, what do you mean? How am I not doing this for grandmother? Am I not doing this for our entire family, Qin? Sister Yi is my granddaughter, but I don't only have one granddaughter. Moreover, she isn't the most filial to me. Shouldn't I be planning for the future of other girls with family Qin families? Moreover, the marriage between the two families is an alliance. Since one granddaughter can't solidify the position of Wang Fei, isn't it time to send another one over? What are you feeling so awkward about? Qin Huaiyuan's face sank as he listened. The imposing manner that he had cultivated in the court for many years was completely released when he suppressed his anger. Although old Madam spoke confidently, she still felt a bit scared when she met Qin Huaiyuan's cold eyes. However, she didn't feel that she was wrong. She only felt that her son was definitely siding with an outsider. Now that he had a wife and daughter, he didn't want his mother anymore. Old Madam felt so wrong that her tears fell down. She sobbed and patted the pillow on her knees. Why is my life so bitter? How did your father teach you? I think you've forgotten. You refuted my words time and time again. You think that your wings have hardened and that you are the head of the family, so you are no longer filial to your mother. Usually, when old Madam cried at this time, Qin Huaiyuan would comfort her gently and say some nice words to coax her. But today, Qin Huaiyuan just stood there silently, looking at her with a distant and unfamiliar gaze. Seeing that Qin Huaiyuan wasn't coaxing her as she had expected, the Dowager Duchess felt even more wronged and burst into tears. What a sin! I don't want to live anymore, I don't want to live anymore. Oh, my heart, it's all in vain. How much do you all dislike me? As she cried, she beat her chest and stamped her feet. She covered her face with a handkerchief. Half of the jade hairpin on her head slipped off, and the bun she wore loosened. Her white hair was scattered, as if she had been bullied. As if she had been abused. Second old master, second old madam, and third old master all silently watched old madam make a fuss. Originally, second old madam wanted to go forward and comfort her. There were already a lot of things happening at home. She cried and made a fuss. Where was the appearance of an old woman? However, second old master secretly pulled second old madam and didn't allow her to approach. Third old master couldn't bear to see his mother like this. He sneered, turned around, and left first. Out of sight, out of mind. There was only Mammy Qin standing awkwardly beside old madam. She didn't know whether to comfort her or leave. There was silence in the room. Old madam's throat was hoarse from crying, but she didn't see anyone come to comfort her. Qin Huaiyuan also didn't come to apologize. Her anger became more and more intense. She beat her chest and pointed at the Sun clan, who had been silent beside Qin Huaiyuan, and scolded, "It's you, this bitch. You urged my Menggu to learn bad things. Tell me, what pillow talk did you have?" Qin Huaiyuan's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. The Sun clan couldn't bear it anymore and finally mocked, "It's really funny. I urged your son to learn bad things. Why don't you take a look at whether your son is a 3-year-old child or not? Would he listen to me if I pillow talk? I also want to tell him to drive out those people who are disturbing the peace of the family. Would he listen? You! Old Madam's eyes widened in anger. She knew that the Sun Clan was scolding her indirectly. The Sun Clan's expression was still as stubborn as before. The words seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of her teeth. I've really had enough. Old Madam is obviously the mistress of the family. You should think of ways to maintain the harmony between your children. But why are you the one who instigates trouble every time? What's wrong with Sister E? Why do you have to harm her like this? You urged 8th girl first and made her fall in love with the son-in-law. Didn't you think that if this matter of becoming a concubine didn't work out, would the sisterly relationship between 8th girl and Sister E be good? Did you think about how your daughter-in-law and sisters-in-law would get along? You're dissatisfied. You feel that your son isn't filial. But let me tell you, this residence, not to mention other people, even us husband and wife, as the biological parents, feel ashamed to live in it. This residence was bought with Sister Yi's money. You lost all your belongings on the way here. If Sister E hadn't used her own money to buy this residence first and was afraid that us husband and wife would lose face between brothers, she quietly transferred the property rights to us. Our whole family would still be renting a residence now. You don't have to work and eat Sister E all day long. Our Sister E didn't want your gratitude and only wanted to show her filial piety. But you? She was kidnapped and we don't even know if she's dead or alive. You actually stabbed her in the back. I think you don't care about your granddaughter's life at all. You're a grandmother. Do you still have a human heart? You're presumptuous. Old Madam angrily beat the mattress. Brother Meng, if you were raised by me, divorce her for me. Divorce her. Divorce me. I can't wait. I've seen through it. When my father and brother were still alive and our Ding general manor was flourishing, who was the one who rushed to propose marriage? I wasn't the one who rushed to marry into a family Qin family. I managed to conceive for 10 months and gave birth to Sister E. Why did I lose her? We were separated for 14 years. Who will make up for this hardship? You despised me for not being able to give birth to a son for your son. You despised my maternal family for losing power. When my maternal family was being persecuted, you shamelessly welcomed the demon empress sister into the family to be a concubine. After suffering a natural disaster, the whole family tightened their belts. Sister E was so hungry that she went to work and hunt. The food she saved was eaten by you. You didn't know how to feel sorry for her. You smacked your lips and turned around to eat the little rabbit she raised. You even dared to eat such a palm-sized little bastard. Do you still have any shame? You enjoy the happiness of family but don't know how to cherish it. Instead, you instigate the relationship between your children. If I don't say it, you'll treat me as a mute. Divorce me, that's even better. My mother has already become rich in the South. I'm not homeless and have nowhere to go. I'm going to go out and talk about how you, as a mother-in-law, treat your children. The Sun Clan cursed angrily and spat fiercely. She turned around and left. Qin Huayuan's brows were already knitted into knots. He turned around and pulled the Sun Clan. Don't go. It's dangerous outside now. A war is about to break out, let go of me. The Sun Clan shook off Qin Huayuan's hand. Tears streamed down her face. Qin Meng, I've been with you for most of my life. I've endured and experienced all the grievances, vexations, and dangers with you. I've endured what I should endure and what I shouldn't. Even when your mother despised me for not being able to give birth to a son, I raised your children one by one. I might be jealous, but it was because I cared about our many years of relationship. But when did I not take in concubines for you? Your mother is a mother. She loves her children and grandchildren, but I'm also a mother. I only have one daughter, Sister E. I was foolish in the past and did not treat her well. When Sister E went missing, it was as if someone dug out my heart and put it on the fire to roast. Your mother wanted to ruin my daughter's marriage for another granddaughter. She wanted to bully my daughter, and you want me to endure it? If you're a man, divorce me now. If it's inconvenient for you to leave the capital, I'll go. I'll go to Tayton to find my daughter. The Sun Clan's voice was trembling in the end. She was sobbing uncontrollably. Qin Huayuan's eyes were also red. He ignored the Sun Clan's fierce struggle and slowly raised his arms to embrace the Sun Clan. All right, I didn't do well enough. We're not young anymore. Be careful not to hurt your body from crying. It's not worth it. We still have to live to see Sister E give birth to children in the future, right? It would have been fine if no one coaxed her, but at this time, leaning into Qin Huayuan's arms and breathing in the faint scent of ink on his body, the Sun Clan grabbed Qin Huayuan's lapels and finally burst into tears. She cried and pounded his chest. It's all your fault. What kind of official are you? You work hard for the family, but why do you have to sacrifice my daughter? My daughter is not even 17 yet. She's still so young. The Sun Clan's long-suppressed worries, grievances, and dissatisfaction were vented out this time. She buried her head in Qin Huayuan's chest and cried until the sky turned dark. Qin Huayuan rested his chin on the top of the Sun Clan's head and allowed her to cry until his lapels were wet. His eyes also gradually turned red. Seeing the husband and wife like this, Second Furen also sobbed and wiped her tears with a handkerchief. She couldn't help but feel sad when she thought of that catastrophe. Her family members and servants died or were lost. Old Madam was dumbfounded. The Sun Clan had been married for so many years, but she had never seen her make such a scene. She actually dared to cry in front of her son's chest. She cried just now, but her eldest son didn't come to coax her. Old Madam pouted and sobbed again. She muttered, "Sinful, unfilial son, unfilial son." Second Old Master rubbed his temples. Seeing that his eldest brother ignored his mother, he could only brace himself. He sat on the edge of the bed and handed a handkerchief to Old Madam. Chapter 528. Eldest brother and sister-in-law are also sad because they lost their child. Moreover, the political affairs in the imperial court are indeed tense. Eldest brother is now the person Your Majesty wants to enter the cabinet. Many factions are watching eldest brother's every move. If things go wrong, he will lose his life. I'm just incompetent and can only be a small official in the Ministry of Rights. If I have the ability, I can also help eldest brother. Mother, we're a family. Everyone knows how much big brother and sister-in-law have paid for the family over the years. Third brother and I are very grateful. Mother, don't be unhappy with big brother because of these things. Instead, you'll distract big brother. Old Madam was very sad. Now, she really saw through Qin Huayuan and felt that he was no longer the filial son who was obedient to her in the past. She put all her love on this son and even neglected the second son of the first wife for so many years. Now, when she was sad, wasn't it her second son who came to coax her? Moreover, Second Old Master's words really gave Old Madam a way out. She couldn't find a reason to refute the Sun Clan and didn't dare to do anything to her eldest son. In the future, she still had to rely on him, so she could only swallow this anger. If she didn't speak now, everyone would think that she was giving in to the Sun Clan as an old person. Therefore, Old Madam wiped her tears and didn't scold people, let alone ask Qin Huayuan to divorce the Sun Clan. In any case, she could see that Qin Huayuan wouldn't be obedient and divorce his wife. Qin Huayuan saw that old madam was coaxed by second old master with a few words, and the crying Sun Clan in his arms finally stopped wailing. His heart relaxed a bit. Mother. Qin Huayuan patted the Sun Clan's shoulder and said, "You're in spring and autumn now, so you should enjoy your remaining years. In the future, you shouldn't worry about the family's affairs, the marriage of your children, or the household's chores. You just need to take care of your own body, live a long life, and let your son be filial to you for a long time." Qin Huayuan's words made old madam's eyes turn red again and she screamed, "You unfilial son! Are you trying to rebel?" By doing this, Qin Huayuan was sternly and clearly warning the Dowager Duchess, letting her know her place and live her own life. She should no longer stretch her hand into other rooms and meddle carelessly. He also didn't need her to take care of the money and things in the inner residence. "Mother, that's all I have to say. If Mother really doesn't like us, we can only move out." Qin Huayuan bowed again and said, "Just now, it was Your Majesty who brought people to our mansion. Your Majesty is suspicious of me. I've been trembling in fear in the imperial court, and I'm already very tired. I just wanted to go home and relax my tense nerves. I didn't want to cause any more trouble. Please understand, Mother." After saying that, Qin Huayuan dragged the Sun Clan out. Everyone was shocked by the news that Your Majesty had come in person and sent people to search their house. Second Master wasn't in the front just now, so he didn't see Li Qitian. Therefore, he only found out about this news now. Old madam was so scared that her whole body trembled. She tightly grabbed Second Master's hand and said, "What your eldest brother said just now. That's not right. That group of people was clearly searching for in-laws. How could it be Your Majesty who brought them to our house?" Second Master was also caught unprepared by this news. He stood up and said, "Mother, right now, the situation in the imperial court is really tense. Son will go and discuss countermeasures with eldest brother. You must not cry again." Okay. Quickly go." Compared to competing with her daughter-in-law, old madam cared more about her own life. She repeatedly waved her hand and urged Second Master to go out. Second Master also came out with Second Madam. When they reached the corridor, they saw that the servants in the courtyard were all standing far away. 8th young Miss and Qin Huaining were standing far away under the eaves of the corridor and talking. They didn't dare to approach. Second Master whispered to Second Madam, "Look after Mother. Don't let her cause trouble again. This time's matter isn't ordinary. I will go and ask eldest brother." Second Madam whispered, "I don't dare. What if I say too much and Mother makes you divorce me?" Second Master was so angry that he rolled his eyes and reprimanded, "Nonsense." Then, he turned around and hurriedly left. Second Madam took a breath of the cold winter air and breathed on her hands. Thinking of the words that the Sun Clan had just scolded old madam, she felt refreshed to the bottom of her heart. She had long disliked old madam's attitude. Almost every word that the Sun Clan had scolded was what she was thinking. Not only did the Sun Clan feel distressed for Qin Yining, Second Madam had also always remembered how good Qin Yining was. Humans weren't plants. There weren't many people who could be as ungrateful and short-sighted as old madam. Second Madam stood outside for a while before returning to her room. She saw that Han's second young mistress was serving old madam. She was happy and relaxed, so she didn't approach. Instead, she sat down on the heated Kong bed in the outer room and took a cup of tea from a maidservant to warm her hands. In the study in the front yard, Qin Huayuan, Second Master, Third Master, Qin Han, and Qin Yu were gathered together. They were discussing the matter of Li Qitian's visit. Qin Huayuan whispered, "Son-in-law brought the troops to the Taiden to find Sister Yi. Your Majesty suspects that son-in-law is colluding with the Dragon Legion and is plotting something. He hurriedly went to the prince's mansion but didn't see his in-laws. Thus, he suspected our mansion and came to find us. So that's how it is. Qin Han said, I didn't expect brother-in-law to have such a plan. Qin Yu also praised, that's right. For the sake of fourth sister, brother-in-law has defied imperial edicts many times. Second master and third master weren't as relaxed as the young people. Second master was silent, calculating the current situation in his heart. Third master said worriedly, Your Majesty came to our house and didn't find anyone. Can he trust us? Big brother, if you say that you didn't participate in this matter, Your Majesty definitely won't believe it. Qin Huaiyuan smiled bitterly, that's right. However, Your Majesty suspects me right now, but he doesn't have any evidence to prove that I hid your in-laws' family. Moreover, Your Majesty won't do anything to them even if they were captured. At most, they will be placed under house arrest in the palace as hostages. If son-in-law doesn't have hostages, he can do things without worry. There's nothing bad about this. Third master said straightforwardly, Big brother, don't worry. Son-in-law is very capable. If he is willing to find Sister E will most likely be fine. As for Your Majesty's suspicions, let him be. In any case, we are not afraid of crooked shadows. It's not like we are harboring them. Let Your Majesty think whatever he wants. Second master thought for a moment and said, Even so, I'm afraid that Your Majesty will suspect Big Brother from now on and won't attach importance to you. When Qin Huaiyuan heard this, he couldn't help but laugh, Don't worry. Although Your Majesty doesn't completely trust me, he still needs me. Our residence is fine for the time being. However, during this period of time, we should think of a way out. A way out. Second master and third master said in unison. Qin Huaiyuan sighed, That's right. It's better to be safe than sorry. I've learned my lesson today. When they thought of the assassin's massacre on Dian, everyone felt a chill in their hearts and felt uncomfortable all over. The atmosphere became oppressive again. Especially Qin Yu and third master. They had both lost their wives, and third master had also lost his son. Everyone's mood was very depressed and sad. Qin Huaiyuan sighed, Born in troubled times, we can only forge ahead, make all the preparations, and then support each other to move forward. It's okay. I will carefully observe the situation outside and take control of everything. Don't worry. Good. I've always been at ease with Big Brother's work. Me too. Uncle always chooses the right direction every time. We are also at ease. Seeing that his two younger brothers and two nephews trusted him so much, Qin Huaiyuan couldn't help but smile for the first time today. However, he was silently praying in his heart. He only hoped that Sister E was safe now and that Pang Xiao could quickly find her. After he found her, even if she wandered the world and never came back, it was still better than being a sacrifice in war. Qin Yining, who was worried about his family, was not feeling well at all at this time. The terrain of the desert and the no-man's land was ever-changing. A moment ago, there were hills, but after sleeping, it became flat land. Moreover, in winter, the temperature during the day was not very high, but the night was very cold. Although they brought enough food and water, the desert was very bumpy. In addition, Qin Yining had refused Xiao Yuqing's offer to take her with them and followed the tribe into the desert. She was already prepared to die. Whether it was physically or mentally, her endurance was almost at its limit. Especially after she thought everything through and understood that she might die, Qin Yining's taut strings suddenly seemed to break. Her body was also weakening day by day. It seemed that the loss of blood caused by the previous injuries was caused by the cold this time. Fortunately, because Qin Yining was carrying heavy supplies this time and after she fell ill, the tribe was very worried and worked together to make a handcart for her. Qin Yining was wrapped in a thick cotton-padded jacket and lying alone in the carriage. She was sometimes awake and sometimes asleep. Lu Heng and Uncle Arhan followed the carriage, one on the left and one on the right. They covered their mouths and noses with scarves, squinted their eyes to resist the wind and sand, and looked at Qin Yining worriedly. "We don't know where we are now. If this goes on, I'm afraid the tribe leader won't be able to survive." After this time, Uncle Arhan privately called Qin Yining and Lu Heng the tribe leader. Lu Heng said, "There is no other way now. We have already given her medicine, but the environment in the desert is too bad for her recovery. Fortunately, there is a carriage." Uncle Arhan sighed. Shigambra spat out the sand in his mouth and said, "Why don't we turn around and go back? Send the tribe leader out of the desert first. The environment outside is much better than here." Lu Heng smiled bitterly and said, "Do you think I don't want to? When we entered the desert, the pursuers were already very close. They were chasing after our footsteps, but when they saw us enter the desert, they didn't dare to chase after us. Under such circumstances, they will definitely not dare to go back and report to Khan. They will definitely wait outside." Chapter 529. But we can't see the end of this desert. When will it end? Harbala said helplessly. Shigambala narrowed his eyes and looked at the sand and dust in the wind. He couldn't help but feel a sense of despair. No matter who it was, if they continued to travel in such an environment, they didn't know where their future lay. They didn't know when they would be able to walk out of this desolation. They would also feel despair. They even thought more than once, could it be that they really couldn't walk out of this desert? Were all their clansmen going to be buried here? Lu Heng walked to the side of the carriage and tidied up the scarf covering Qin Yining's mouth and nose to block the sand and dust. He looked at her long eyelashes that fluttered like butterfly wings as she slept and looked at her thin and pale face. He couldn't help but feel sad. How could he save her? Even if he couldn't get her love, he didn't want to see her die in front of him. Lu Heng's eyes were too worried and sad. The people around him also felt sad when they saw him. After interacting with each other day and night, they were like family to each other. They were companions who had gone through life and death together. Qin Yining could have escaped, but she stayed here to share the trials and tribulations with them because of her friendship. If she really lost her life like this, everyone would feel guilty. Especially the clansmen who often interacted with Qin Yining and Lu Heng, such as Uncle Arhan and the Shigambla brothers. They were the ones who could see Lu Heng's feelings for Qin Yining the most. Now Qin Yining fell ill in such a harsh environment. But they were helpless. Even they were worried, let alone Lu Heng, who had always been interested in Qin Yining. Everyone looked at each other. They couldn't help but feel sad. The group continued to move forward in the wind and sand. Fortunately, they didn't encounter a sandstorm like yesterday until the sun set. Qin Yining was in a deep sleep. When he woke up, he realized that he was in a tent. There was a bright bonfire in the middle of the tent, and the ground was covered with soft sand. Outside the triangular tent, a strong wind blew, filling the air with dust and sand. The tent also fluttered in the wind. Qin Yining was so cold that her entire body was trembling. Even her teeth were chattering, but she didn't have the strength to get up. She didn't even have the strength to raise her hands to wrap the blanket tightly around herself. Lu Heng came in with a ceramic bowl from outside the tent. He saw Qin Yining's half-opened eyes, his face pale, and his entire body trembling. He immediately crouched down beside her and said, "You're awake. How do you feel?" Qin Yining forced himself to smile. His pale and cracked lips moved, but he couldn't make a sound in his dry and painful throat. Qin Yining tried to speak a few times, but to no avail. His long eyelashes drooped in disappointment. Lu Heng said softly, sorry to offend you. He lifted Qin Yining, who was trembling all over, and let her rest in the crook of his arm. He used his other hand to feed her the rice soup. Drink more. Eat more. Your body will only get better if you have more nutrition. This is hot, and the temperature is just right. Drink it and it will warm you up. Qin Yining felt a little uncomfortable. However, her entire body was as soft as a strand of noodles. The slightest movement would cause her vision to darken. She didn't have the strength to care about this at all. She could only move the corners of her lips and silently say, thank you. Then, she took small sips from the bowl. Her face was as white as a sheet of paper. The hair on her forehead was wet with cold sweat. Strands of hair stuck to her forehead and ears, making her face look even thinner and smaller. Lu Heng lowered his head to look at Qin Yining, who was nestled in the crook of his arm and sipping the rice soup. His heart felt as if it had been brushed with a layer of honey. If Qin Yining wasn't trembling all over, and anyone who looked at her could feel how uncomfortable she was, Lu Heng wished that time could stop right there and then. If only the two of them could accompany each other in such a peaceful time, Lu Heng would be willing to give up all his fame and fortune. The warm rice soup slid down her stinging throat and flowed down her esophagus into her stomach. This kind of warmth formed a strong contrast with the bone-chilling cold she felt. She shivered all over and trembled violently. Lu Heng hurriedly put down the empty bowl and took out a clean cotton handkerchief to carefully wipe off the cold sweat on her face and neck. Qin Yining wanted to dodge, but she didn't have the strength to do so. In the end, she could only close her eyes and make do for the time being. How do you feel? Are you okay? Lu Heng asked worriedly. Qin Yining smiled bitterly. Her throat, which had been moistened by the rice soup, made a hoarse sound that sounded like sandpaper being rubbed against something. The sound was almost inaudible, as if she was breathing into Lu Heng's ear. I don't think it's good. Her hot breath blew into his ear. She had to take a breath to finish a simple sentence. Her voice was as soft as a mosquito's and was almost inaudible. Lu Heng's heart trembled when he heard that. His eyes were hot and he was almost about to cry. Don't worry. We have plenty of food and water. I even brought some medicinal herbs. As long as you take good care of yourself, eat well, and take medicine, you will definitely get better. Qin Yining smiled tiredly and nodded with difficulty. Then, she shook her head and said intermittently, you don't have to be too stubborn. People are always going to die. Life and death are predestined. You don't have to force it. Lu Heng felt a great pain in his heart. It was as if there was a crack in his heart and something warm was flowing out. It was so painful that he could barely breathe. After a long while, Lu Heng finally calmed himself down. He forced a smile and wiped her cold sweat with a handkerchief again. You are right. People are predestined to die, and your life will definitely not end here. You are a person with good fortune. Your family and Wang Yi are all waiting for you to return. In the future, you will live a life full of children and grandchildren. You will live a carefree life. You won't have to work so hard anymore. Those days are not far away, so you have to have some confidence in yourself. Qin Yining listened to Lu Heng's comforting words, but she did not understand them. Her head and ears were buzzing. Lu Heng's words also became a jumbled mess that overlapped with each other. However, she knew that Lu Heng must be comforting her. Therefore, Qin Yining tiredly closed her eyes and softly said, "Thank you." Qin Yining felt that her "thank you" was already very loud, but in Lu Heng's ears, it was almost inaudible. For a moment, Lu Heng even hoped that he could take her out of the desert to find a doctor. However, as they walked further and further, the path they came from became more and more confusing. Until now, Lu Heng could barely tell which direction they came from. This was a hopeless situation where they would be trapped in the desert until they died. Lu Heng took off his cotton robe and hugged Qin Yining, who had already fallen asleep again, tightly. Then, he covered the two of them with a blanket and a cotton robe. Qin Yining's cheeks and hands were as cold as ice. Even though she had fainted, her whole body could not help but tremble. Lu Heng first held both of her hands with one hand and wanted to pass his heat to her. However, after a long time, his hands were already cold from her body temperature, but she was still very cold. Lu Heng was extremely worried and did not feel sleepy at this time. He got up and made the bonfire bigger, adjusted the tent lower, and then hugged Qin Yining and lay down at the position closest to the bonfire. This time, he directly put Qin Yining's hands in his arms and hugged her tightly, hoping that his chest could warm her up. Qin Yining was not completely asleep. At this time, she did not know where she was. She could not tell if this was the mountain where she lived when she was young or the Prime Minister's residence where she came and went later. She had a dream. She dreamed that she had made a mistake and could not learn the rules that her wet nurse had taught her. Old Madam and the Sun clan wanted to punish her by making her kneel. Not only did they make her kneel, they also threw her books into the pond. She could not bear to do it, so she jumped into the frozen water in the dead of winter. The water was really cold. It was so cold that her bones seemed to be frozen, and her fingers were also frozen stiff. However, no matter how deep she went into the pond, she could not catch up with her books. The deeper she went, the colder it became. Qin Yining felt that she could not hold on any longer, so she wanted to give up on those books. However, when she turned around, she realized that the buildings in Qin Manor had disappeared, and the people around her had also disappeared. She was in the cold, frozen pond. She wanted to climb out, but she could not find the shore. She was so scared that she almost cried. She kept saying, "It's fine if you don't come. It's fine if you don't come. It's better to be alone on the mountain. You shouldn't have come back." Lu Heng was already a little dazed when he was not paying attention. In his half-awake state, he heard someone murmuring in a low voice. He only heard one sentence clearly, "You shouldn't have come back." Lu Heng was concerned about Qin Yining, so naturally, he had carefully inquired about Qin Yining. Therefore, Lu Heng knew how she was swapped when she was young, how she was adopted outside, how she survived on the mountain alone, how she returned to the Qin Manor after she was found, and how she survived in Qin Manor. Therefore, Qin Yining's ravings immediately poked at the soft spot in Lu Heng's heart. Such a weak and helpless person, yet her heart was so strong. Qin Yining was a shining point in Lu Heng's eyes from head to toe. She was an existence that could be discovered and sealed away in his heart like a star that would never shine. However, no matter how beautiful and shining the star was, he did not know when the starlight would suddenly disappear. Sometimes, Lu Heng wished that he could go back in time. If that was the case, he could find Qin Yining when she was young first. He could participate in her life without any worries, help her, and help her grow. He could help her so that she would not have to pick wild fruits and hunt for food at such a young age. She would not have to live such a hard life. Chapter 530. Lu Heng was very glad that his damned cousin allowed him to meet Qin Yining at this time. Although Qin Yining didn't have any romantic feelings for him, being able to meet her at the best time of his life and leave a good impression on her was enough to satisfy him. If he hadn't met Qin Yining at this time, or if he had gotten a little older, perhaps when they met again, they wouldn't have trusted each other as much as they did in this lifetime. Was this what Qin Yining meant by, "Everyone has their own fate"? Lu Heng's thoughts ran wild. After a long time, he frowned in exhaustion and fell asleep again. After an unknown amount of time, he suddenly felt that he was hugging a very hot oven. Lu Heng suddenly opened his eyes. His exhausted appearance couldn't hide his anxiety. Qin Yining had a fever. And it was a high fever that wouldn't subside. After all, it wasn't convenient for Lu Heng to help Qin Yining scrub her. Hugging her to sleep while she was unconscious was already crossing the line. Therefore, Lu Heng went to find two trustworthy female clansmen to help Qin Yining scrub and lower her temperature. Qin Yining's originally pale face was now an unhealthy shade of red because of her fever. Her lips were so dry that they cracked a few times. The high fever didn't subside, causing her body, which was previously as cold as ice, to feel abnormally hot. When the clansmen helped Qin Yining wipe her sweat, they realized that Qin Yining had really lost a lot of weight, especially the bones on her wrists. They seemed to be very sharp and could pierce through her skin at any moment. After the clansmen helped Qin Yining scrub her, Lu Heng returned to the tent and fed Qin Yining some warm water. Qin Yining subconsciously swallowed a few mouthfuls. When he tried to feed her something else, Lu Heng helplessly realized that Qin Yining refused to open her mouth. It was as if she was determined to die. Lu Heng couldn't help but sigh when he saw how weak Qin Yining was. He persuaded her in a low voice, "Wake up. No matter what, you have to drink more warm water and eat more. Your current appearance is completely different from when we first met. Look at how thin you are." Even though he knew that Qin Yining was unconscious and couldn't hear him, Lu Heng still persisted in persuading her gently. Qin Yining was sometimes cold and sometimes hot. She would often lift the blanket on her body. She felt as if she was in a raging fire. Large beads of sweat rolled down her forehead. Lu hurriedly used his sleeves to wipe them away. Lu Heng looked at Qin Yining's sweat-drenched hair. For a moment, he felt sad in his heart. He had never been a pretentious person. When someone told him that the Lu family was in trouble, he wasn't afraid to confront them head-on. Even so, no matter how heartless Lu Heng was, he had already reserved the softest part of his heart for Qin Yining. Now that Qin Yining was terminally ill, he didn't have the ability to save her. Lu Heng felt as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. If he had known that something like this would happen, he would have thought of a way to snatch a doctor to accompany them when they first entered the desert. If Qin Yining's cold had been properly treated from the beginning, it wouldn't have developed into such a dangerous situation. Qin Yining obviously didn't know what the people around her were thinking or doing. At this moment, she felt as if she had fallen into a pitch-black abyss. There was no light in front of her. The abyss seemed to be a pool of lava that was about to melt her bit by bit. So hot. So hot. Qin Yining mumbled uncomfortably. She didn't know when she fell into a deep sleep. She didn't even know that Lu Heng had carried her into the carriage with a blanket. Over the past few days, Qin Yining's time awake had decreased because of her weak body. The bad premonition in her heart had also slowly spread. She didn't know how long she had been unconscious. When she opened her eyes again, she was lying on a wooden carriage. She could hear gusts of wind howling in her ears. She vaguely felt someone helping her adjust her scarf. Then, a warm hand covered her forehead. Then, the person sighed and said, "Don't be afraid. We will definitely walk out of this desert. We have enough food. There's nothing to be afraid of." Qin Yining knew that Lu Heng was comforting her again. During this period, Lu Heng had taken good care of her in every possible way. She was very grateful. "Thank you." Lu Heng saw that Qin Yining had opened her mouth to speak and hurriedly came over. "You're awake. Do you want some water?" Qin Yining tried her best to say, "If I can't take it anymore, put me down. Put me down." After saying this, she fell asleep again. The last thing she heard was Lu Heng saying in her ear over and over again, "Don't be afraid. I won't put you down. I won't put you down." Qin Yining didn't know how long she had been unconscious for. She even thought that she might never wake up again. She didn't even have time to tell Pang Xiao what she wanted to say. But when she opened her eyes again, Qin Yining found herself in a mud house with a rather high dust-bearing height. Was she still in the desert? How could there be such a building in the desert? Qin Yining couldn't help but start to look at her surroundings. This room was very large. The surrounding walls were made of yellow mud and wood. The furnishings in the room were also very simple. Most of the products were pottery and wood carvings. She was sleeping on a very large heated Kong bed. The bedding on it was made of fine cotton. The patterns on the cotton were also very delicate. It seemed to be a mysterious and Ji Xiang totem, but it wasn't the usual patterns of flowers, birds, or riches. Qin Yining couldn't help but wonder where she was. Could it be that Lu Heng took her out of the desert to save her life? But the desert terrain in the no-man's land changed rapidly. It was impossible to find the way back. Moreover, the architectural style and the totem on the furnishings here didn't seem to be the style of Dezhou or any Taitan country. Qin Yining moved her fingers. She felt that she had recovered some of her strength. Her mind wasn't as muddled as before. Even the burning pain in her throat and the dryness of her lips seemed to have improved a lot. Qin Yining was very curious. She was also very glad that she was getting better. She originally thought that she was going to lose her life. She didn't expect that she would be able to survive. Just as Qin Yining opened her beautiful eyes and looked around, the wooden door suddenly creaked. She looked in the direction of the sound and saw a tall man wearing a red robe walking over. The man looked to be in his 40s. His hair was slightly curly and was neatly tied into a bun on the top of his head. His facial features were very deep. His high nose and deep eyes were very distinctive. The robe he was wearing was also made of fine cotton. It also had the strange and complicated patterns on the bedding and furnishings. At this moment, he slowly walked over. A pair of black eyes stared at Qin Yining, who was lying on the heated Kong bed. His gaze was very deep and infatuated. His eyes didn't even blink, as if he was looking at a priceless treasure. "You're awake." Qin Yining was very surprised. This person spoke the Dezhou language. Moreover, it was the accent of Dezhou, which was close to the south and bordered the Dian dynasty. Could it be that she had already returned to Dezhou? Seeing that Qin Yining only looked at him silently and didn't speak, the man smiled and said, "Are you still not fully recovered? Have you completely recovered?" Without waiting for Qin Yining to reply, the man clapped his hands 3 times. Then, 2 maids wearing gray-green robes walked in. Their hair was neatly tied up. The 2 maids curtsied to the man. "Royal Prince." "Go and serve the goddess." "Yes, Royal Prince." The 2 maids wanted to walk over slowly with Qin Yining. Qin Yining was confused by her words. This was a royal prince. Qin Yining couldn't remember any royal prince of Dezhou who looked this age and looked like this. Not to mention the Dian dynasty. In the former Beiji country, apart from the crown prince inheriting the throne, the brothers were conferred the title of prince. The brothers' children were all conferred the title of royal prince and had their own fiefs. Could this uncle be the former royal prince of Beiji? The strangest thing was that he actually called her goddess. What were these people thinking? How did she become a goddess? Just as Qin Yining was letting her imagination run wild, the 2 maids had already walked in front of her. They curtsied and said, "Goddess, the maids will serve you as you wash up. The kitchen has already prepared food for you. You can eat it after you wash up." She almost blurted out, "Why are you calling me goddess?" However, Qin Yining calmly held back. She didn't immediately speak. Anyway, she felt sticky all over. She should take a bath first so that she could eat. Just as Qin Yining was helped up by the two maids and was about to walk to the side room, the middle-aged man who was addressed as the royal prince also walked a few steps forward. Qin Yining frowned and looked back. The royal prince seemed to be intimidated by her gaze and slowly stopped in his tracks. However, his gaze towards Qin Yining was still very fervent. Qin Yining was very displeased because this person's gaze was too blatant. It was as if she had not eaten for a few meals and suddenly saw a feast of fish and meat. It made her feel as if she was meat on the chopping block and could only be slaughtered under this person's gaze. However, the situation was unclear right now. Qin Yining didn't dare to speak rashly and anger the other party. She planned to observe for a while before deciding what to do next. In addition, she also wanted to find out the whereabouts of the other Minuo tribe members. Therefore, she didn't say anything else and walked into the side room with the help of the maids. The side room was also very spacious, and the ceiling was also very high. The furnishings and the surroundings all revealed a bit of rusticity. Coupled with the furnishings with special patterns or totems, it gave off a kind of foreign aura. The maids helped Qin Yining to the back of the screen. They helped her up the 3 wooden steps. Only then did Qin Yining realize that there was a wooden bathtub half embedded in the floor above the steps. The water inside was steaming hot. There was a wooden ladle floating on the surface of the water. 2 towels were placed on the edge of the bathtub. Qin Yining said, "You may leave. Goddess's body is still very weak. Please allow us to serve you as you bathe." The 2 maids bowed deeply as they spoke. Although Qin Yining had been rich before, she wasn't the kind of person who could enjoy such a great ceremony with a clear conscience. Moreover, she felt her current body. Although it was much better than before she fainted, she still didn't have the strength to do so. However, she did not have the strength to take a bath alone. Moreover, she still wanted to ask about the situation here, so she simply nodded. "You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."